beat, Mike. Toronto. VK on the beat. Check. I'm in Toronto where you wanna get the city love. I'm from Toronto where you wanna get the city love. I'm in Toronto like we wanna get the city love. My city love me back for my city love.
Welcome to episode 1312, 1312 of Toronto Mic'd, proudly brought to you by Great Lakes Brewery, a fiercely independent craft brewery who believes in supporting communities, good times, and brewing amazing beer. Order online for free local home delivery in the GTA. Palma Pasta. Enjoy the taste of fresh, homemade Italian pasta and entrees from Palma Pasta in Mississauga and Oakville. RecycleMyElectronics.ca. Committing to our planet's future means properly recycling our electronics of the past. Getting hip to the hip. An evening for the Downey Wenjack Fund on September 1st. Save 10% with the promo code FOTM10. And Pumpkins After Dark. Use the promo code TOMIC15 and save 15% this month at pumpkinsafterdark.com. And last but not least, Ridley Funeral Home. Pillars of the community since 1921. Today, celebrating 30 years of 680 News, now CityNews 680, is Scott Metcalfe, Mike Eppel.
Hello.
And Richard Southern.
Hello, Toronto Mike.
Welcome, all three of you.
Thank you.
Good to have you all back. You've all been here one time before, so this is the second appearance for all three of you.
Yes.
You have more ads than City News 680. I'm very impressed. We need to hire you. The sales team needs to hire you.
I don't bill as much as 680, though. That's where I need some help here. Send me all the 680 News sales representatives, and I want to talk to them. But
well, I've got my ticket to the Get Hip with the Hip event.
So you'll be there on that's
the plan.
This is how I'm going to sell it from now on. See Mike Eppel in the flesh.
Well, before we go any further, it needs to be said, if you don't already know this, that Mike Eppel is, and I say this truthfully, he's your biggest fan, Toronto Mike.
Is that true, Mike?
I do take some. I will take that credit. Yes,
he talks about you all the time. When I talk to Mike, and he listens
I am huge
to
on the
every
podcast.
Single
I want to reach
episode.
over and kiss him on the forehead right now.
I'm sweating because I walked from the Mimico GO station.
Good for you.
I'm used to walking the dogs, walking on the golf course.
Was that a long? Do you know? Like what is
30
that?
minutes.
Like, is that
It's
like
30 minutes.
6K? What is that?
No, it's just over 2K.
That's it. No.
Yeah,
it's gotta be
that's
more
what
than
it said
that.
on the Googler.
Okay, I trust the Googler.
Yeah, I would have taken my bike on the GO train, but I had that stolen recently.
And
I'm coming public to this, to the masses about
Mike
this.
even obtained video
There's
of
a
his
lot
bike
here.
being stolen.
So you have video of someone stealing your bike?
I do.
But I asked you earlier, so I know the answer.
Yes.
Did you lock your bike outside the metro?
I was trusting.
See,
I was a trusting
individual. You can do that
individual.
at like provincial parks. You can do that, okay? You don't
I was
have to lock
foolish.
But in the real world...
Random Thursday night. Went in for 5 minutes to just pick up a couple of things. Came out, bike gone. Went and checked on the...
And this is Whitby. Mike lives in Whitby.
I know. What is going on?
But this doesn't surprise me. You need to throw at least some kind of lock on it.
I should have.
Yeah.
I should have. I just didn't. I didn't even think about it.
Scott, are you surprised that Mike Eppel got his bike stolen outside a metro when he didn't even lock it? Let's hear the voice of reason. Scott Metcalfe, everybody.
The randomness of it, that a person... I have the entire incident on video from the surveillance cams, for goodness sakes. Wow. And I know I'm immediately off topic of what we're here to talk about, but... Yeah, it's just the backstory of how I got here.
Less about
and
this
I
right
know,
now.
right? It's like,
why not tweet the video?
No,
and then
I'm not doing that. I'm going. I know.
We don't want vigilante justice.
Well, I am Batman.
You're
Batman.
You're Ep-Man.
Yes, thank you.
Did you see Bojana by any chance before you?
No.
Okay, we gotta rectify that because Bojana is your biggest fan. So I think just to recover here. So
yes,
you're my biggest fan.
Sure.
Bojana is your biggest fan. And I am Richard Southern's biggest fan.
There you go. Wow. It's a full circle.
Thank you, Mike.
Scott, are you there? I just want to make sure.
I used to work at the Fan, but I don't think anybody's a fan of mine.
I'm a big fan of Scott.
We're both big.
Me, so I'm a big fan of Scott.
Look, before this gets away from us, lots going on here. I will just recognize that I am a big Scott Metcalfe fan because in many episodes when there is a reference to the Fan Sports Radio 1430 before it moved to 590, I whip out this binder and I wave it like this, and this will mean nothing to the listenership, but because they can't see it. But I love this Fan 590 Sports Radio binder that was gifted to me by Scott Metcalfe on episode 1106. And here's what I wrote at the time, because I just want people to know there's deep dives of all three of these gentlemen. This episode is going to be a little more about 680, but this Scott Metcalfe debut was, what did I write? Mike was joined by 45-year radio veteran. Let's do the math on that, guys. Scott Metcalfe, as they discuss his recent retirement from 680 News, because that's what it was called back then, and the 30-year history of CJCL, the Fan 1430/590. We talked for almost 2 hours. You brought all these great clips, Scott, and it's just a thorough history of CJCL as a all-sports radio station.
That was one of your better episodes, really. I enjoyed that.
That was one of my better episodes.
Oh, absolutely. It was your best.
That was Scott's best appearance.
Hey, I have some more stuff. Do you want to get that?
Oh my God, yes, please.
Scott has a bag full of swag here.
I expect that from all my guests.
It's not big. Anyway.
You should all take a note from Scott Metcalfe. Bring me gifts.
In here is a 680 News mic flash for Mike.
Wow. There it is.
Very nice. That's you can't buy those anymore.
No, you cannot.
Can you still hear me?
Turn it so that the no.
I'll use it later. I gotta, but this is going to be on permanent display in the TMDS studio. Thank you very much, Scott.
And also, because you're a bike rider, we had these. Now, whenever they change logos or change names, this stuff they just set aside. But those are for bike riders. They're reflective.
Oh, and then you know what they do? I think
Velcro around your leg,
right? Because your pants. Your leg of your pants will get caught in the chain, and you need to kind of contain that. Thank you very much, Scott Metcalfe. What did you guys bring me? Oh, there's more. Hold on.
And this is from Richard and Mike. Okay. It's a pen. 680 pen.
You know, I used to get pens from Woodbine Racetrack whenever Peter Gross would visit me. He would visit me for Down the Stretch before the pandemic, before we changed how we do things around here. And I have like a bunch of pens you get at the racetrack, but none as fine as this 680 News pen. Thank you very much, Scott Metcalfe. And thank you, Richard and Mike, and I appreciate it. Okay, so that's Scott's episode 1106. But if you go back to episode 890, Mike chats with 680 News and Breakfast Television business reporter Mike Eppel about Tilsonburg, and my back still aches when I hear that word. Working day 1 at the Fan 1430 and day 3 at 680 News.
Yeah, both there for both launches. Format changes.
But day 3, you missed a couple of days.
I was in the building.
Okay.
Yeah. When you play, as I expect you would, the initial sound of the initial sign-on of 680 News.
We built this city.
Well, there's that. That song. Yeah, I was there. I don't exactly remember why I didn't start until day 2 or 3. Actually, it is such a distant memory.
But you're early at.
I was in the building. I remember.
I know we're not even done this description here. Okay, because we talked about your Toronto mic'd mug. That was a clue. You're a big fan.
Yes.
We talked about Peter Gross because you and Peter Gross are good friends.
Yes.
We talked about Dick Smythe, who's not the father of Stephanie Smythe,
as you explained yesterday in your.
People still think that's true. They still think that. And we always correct those people. And you were great. And we did that in the backyard.
Yes, that's right.
Okay, so Scott was in the basement. You were in the backyard. Okay, go back to everybody. This is in order. Go back to episode 724. Mike chats with Richard Southern about his career at 680 News. When did you join 680 News, Richard?
07, 16 years ago. Scott Metcalfe hired me.
Scott, he's not perfect.
He did a lot of
one
stuff.
One of the best hires ever.
So
Scott hired me at the Fan. You hired me at the Fan, right? So.
Okay, that's a continuing thread here. So Scott's a day oneer, and when are you at 680, Scott? Like for day 1, or what's your?
No. 10 years late. 10 years in.
Okay, but you were in the building too.
No, I was at the Fan. Different company, and actually
telemedia.
There's a short story here that Mike's not aware of. He was persona non grata at my house for a while.
Mike Eppel.
Yes, because he left the Fan to go to 680, which was great. I said congratulations, shook his hand, and he left.
Competition.
But I think at the time that I was getting ready for a vacation or something, and the fan was a small staff, as you remember.
Yeah.
There weren't a lot of people, so I ended up having to cover for you and do sportscasts.
Wait, you missed your vacation for this?
Well,
I don't
something
remember
like that.
this.
But Mike saved
It's all
himself.
coming out.
Mike is now a hero.
How?
Because when I got an RTDNA award, you videoed it on your phone, posted it to YouTube, and I shared it with my family, and now you're a hero.
Oh, thank you.
There you go.
So up until that point, though, you were not a big fan of Mike for screwing your vacation up.
I was always a fan of Mike.
I don't remember I was part-time at the Fan at that time.
Yeah, I don't.
Yeah, and when
I probably ended up working weekends.
And when John Hinnon offered me a full-time job, well,
yeah, you got to take it.
Okay, to finish up the Richard Southern description here, though, so we talked about Richard. Also, we talked about him on City News and Breakfast Television. His appearances on Primetime Sports with Bob McCowan.
When I filled in for Mike Eppel.
Right,
Yes.
of course. Yeah, I don't. They're
We also
written,
talked about
The Money Game.
I pulled it out of you. It was a great chat we had during the pandemic in your backyard, and I pulled it out of you that you really didn't listen to 680 very much because you ride your bike, and I was trying to convince you to put some headphones on while you're on your bike and listen to 680. Have you been doing that, Toronto Mike?
I've not been doing that, Richard, but I root for you guys, and I will say to a T.
Why not?
But there's other things I need to other media I need to consume, to be quite honest. But I do.
He's very busy.
I root hard for you guys. I literally bike by Carl Hansky on the reg. He's in the neighborhood, and I see him all the time. I told him about this episode. He's going to be listening in.
Is he the mystery guest that you keep alluding to?
Yeah, maybe. I haven't even teased it yet, but there might be a mystery guest. You might have noticed there's 4 chairs around the studio, and there's only 3 of you. So we'll see. I don't know. But we'll talk more about that maybe. I don't know. But Carl Hansky in the hood just yesterday in this very basement was, who wants to guess?
Well, I listened to it on the way over.
Listen to it.
Yeah.
Paul Cook and Stephanie Smythe. So I feel like, and recently Harold Hossein was here. There's been a lot of 680 content lately.
Thank you.
And we're going to kick it into overdrive here because the great Scott Metcalfe has sent me some great audio, and we're gonna walk through, what do you want to call this? The ongoing history of 680?
Yeah, well, what we did was there's a podcast, City News 680, 30 Years in the Rearview Mirror, which I'm plugging. That's
Scott did a
Plug
great
the heck
job
out of that,
putting
you know?
that
Yeah.
together.
I don't mind.
But it's a good history of 680, and the reason that it was done is that there was so much good stuff over the years, including at the very beginning. And the backstory of how 680 started is interesting as well.
Well, I can't wait to capture these stories. I will say to a T, and I haven't met... I think I asked Paul Cook, are there any assholes at 680? Because, okay, so I know, even though Carl won't come on, Richard's obviously put up his hand.
President accounted for it.
Carl Hansky has not been on Toronto Mike, but that's his choice. And I'm sure when he announces his retirement in whatever years, he'll be here the next day. But so he's a sweetheart, I can tell you from chatting him up on the streets here in New Toronto. But I mean, Mike Eppel's a sweetheart. Richard Southern's a sweetheart. Peter Gross is a sweetheart. Paul Cook was a very nice man yesterday. I assume he's a sweetheart. You know, Stephanie Smythe and I get along really well. She's a sweetheart. Who am I missing here? Oh, yeah, Scott Metcalfe. He's a sweetheart. To a T, everybody that I've met who's been on the airwaves at 680 is a sweetheart. So is it just that the assholes won't come on? Or are there just literally, tell me now before we dive into this history, are there no jerks at 680?
I don't think there are.
I mean, it's kind of
it's a loaded question, too.
It is kind of a family
it's a bit of a loaded
atmosphere in
question.
many ways.
It's a family atmosphere.
I think one of the things we always tried to do, and this was Paul, who's the managing editor, so he had some say in how the station was managed, and Amber LeBlanc, who's the current news director.
Is she good?
Well,
Fantastic.
Really good.
They're the 2 best news directors of 680 News are Amber LeBlanc and Stephanie Smythe.
Get out of here, Scott.
They were the best. They were the best. But anyway, one of the things that we always promoted and focused on was respect. And respect is totally a two-way street. Okay, so if you give respect, you can expect it back. So expect respect. But if there were people who didn't measure up in that way, they would fade away. And it wasn't that they were pushed out or anything. They just didn't fit.
Right.
And you could sense that on the team. It's a real team effort. And we've been very, very lucky, but very, very careful. Richard being hired. what would happen is we get interns in, and we've hired a lot of interns over the years. People like Cormac McSweeney, who we'll hear from later, and great interns.
Maybe he's a mystery guest.
Yeah. And James Monroe. And what would happen is the interns would come in and they'd be there for a couple of months or whatever. You went to Seneca, right? Mm-hmm. And I wouldn't hire the interns. Everybody else hired the interns. They'd come to me and they'd say, you got to keep Richard Southern. Like, he's so good. We just love having him around. We got to find a place for Richard. So that's how a lot of these people got hired. And so that looks after itself.
Makes sense that you'd have a good crew over there. So, and you, again, I know I say this to all my guests, but I don't. You can listen back. You are 3 of my favorite FOTM. So thank you for returning so we could talk about the history of 680. And maybe I'll pass the baton. Shout out to Donovan Bailey. He was here tomorrow. But and a question I need to ask later, maybe when the mystery guest is here, about the 1996 Olympics. But tell me, Scott Metcalfe, maybe I might have a seeded question from an anonymous person. But the history of 680, maybe you want to take us back to, we're going to go all the way back to the 20s, I guess, but take us away, Scott, and then you just give me the point when you're ready to hear audio.
Okay, well, and this was all part of why we wanted to do this, okay? So it goes back to Ted Rogers' father. So in the 1920s, Ted's father invented a radio tube that allowed you to plug a radio into the wall. Up until then, all radios were battery operated, but people hated the batteries. They were filled with bad chemicals and they would leak and explode and cause issues. Around the world, people were trying to invent a way to plug the radio into the wall. And it was Ted's father who figured it out with a particular kind of tube and the wiring and all the rest.
So you might call that batteryless.
Well, that's exactly what CFRB is. So Ted's father started CFRB, and what that stood for in his mind was Canada's first Rogers batteryless. So the batteries were so disliked that in the marketing, they used the word batteryless rather than electric. Because what's an electric radio back then? People go, what's that?
Right.
But batteryless, yeah, I don't want that battery.
Fascinating.
I know. So that was the great story about that. So,
and does Bell Media know that they own Canada's first Rogers batteryless?
Yeah, I know. Eh?
Well, it's like CP24. That's Cable Pulse 24. Nobody knows that, right?
That's right. All these things.
You know who knows that? This guy right here. Shout out to Gord Martineau.
Yes, absolutely. And those were
Harold Hossein.
Those were great years too.
Yeah.
So Ted's father died suddenly at the age of 38 in 1939. And what happened was the family lost control of CFRB and the radio business. Eventually that faded away. And as a boy, Ted told his mother, I'll get it back.
Wow. We got to make a movie. This is exciting. I'm into this story.
You know what? Yeah, exactly. Like the emotion and the family connections to the history are amazing. So and this is the first clip we have coming up. In 2008, just a few months before his death, Ted Rogers was asked about the influence of his father during an interview with a guy who was on here yesterday.
You got to call him an FOTM. Who?
FOTM, Paul Cook.
Now, your dad, of course, was an inventor and an entrepreneur, and he came up with the plug-in radio, a major invention at the time, and he was also a workaholic, much like you are. He died at an early age, 38. You were just 5. What impact did that have on your life?
Well, I guess, everything, because if he'd lived, I might have been just a spoiled brat, and I wouldn't have the drive and ambition that I have had during my lifetime to win back his name and reputation.
So that's the backstory.
Great clip.
That's the backstory. It is. And so after they lost the stuff, the first station Ted bought was CHFI, an FM station in 1960 when there weren't even FM radios. And this was he took a chance and it worked out. And then when he got 680, he decided to call it CFTR, and he imagined that stood for Canada's first Ted Rogers, and that was a tribute to his father. So that's what CFTR stands for.
Amazing. I love that. So CHFI is just hi-fi, right? That's just like Fidelity, I guess, CHFI.
I believe so. I'm not even sure.
Sure.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, with the FM.
Sure.
Well, Eppel remembers the 1920s. So.
Not too far off.
He has a tractor from the 1920s.
Probably.
I would ask the loaded question here, but I don't trust I'd get honest answers. But I'd go around the horn now and ask how you guys feel about the Ted Rogers statue outside the Dome. But I won't put you in that spot because
I think it's fair to say there's room for other statues, and maybe hopefully we
so
get
keep
others.
Ted, but maybe add a Joe Carter or a Joey Bats or something.
Yeah, I'm in favor of that. And I spent my high school years in Chatham, Ontario, and just this summer they unveiled a statue for Ferguson Jenkins.
Fergie Jenkins.
And it's a copy of the statue that they have in Chicago, outside the Cubs Wrigley Field.
Amazing.
So and it's life size. So when I went to see it, you think statue, whatever. When you went to see it, it's a beautiful statue. It's Fergie in full form, and he is one of the best pitchers in baseball history, and he's from Chatham.
Right.
And so I was looking at it, and I thought, what a great idea. And then I thought about the Ted statue, and I thought, okay, look, the Blue Jays are in Toronto because of Ted. So fair enough, they can have a statue. But
They did buy the place.
I agree with you that a Joe Carter, absolutely. A Joe Carter statue would be great, and maybe some others. You guys can debate. But, but I think instead of saying remove Ted, I think you should add Blue Jays.
And the city could also get that water fountain going again.
Right. I mean,
Except there's no money for that.
You got to find that money. Love it. Love the history here.
Shout out to Paul Cook there, interviewing the late, great Ted Rogers, because that's not easy. The other month, they tasked me with interviewing current Rogers CEO, Tony Staffieri, about the Shaw purchase. Not an easy task when you're interviewing the big boss. No. So Paul did a great job with that.
Wait, do you get extra anxiety knowing like there's a lot of ears on this and this is like, so how did you do? I would play the clip, but I don't have it.
Good enough on the newsroom. They let me, do a fair and balanced story. Okay? Well, it wasn't easy. I did a fair and balanced story.
Right.
But you got 3 PR guys standing there. It's not an easy job,
But I mean, that guy doesn't even have the last name Rogers. Like, that's a whole additional layer of anxiety, I would think. And Paul Cook did a great job. I was asking Paul, because Paul's got those pipes. You guys have great voices, too. Although, Richard, I feel, is more in my ballpark. Like, I feel like Richard, did you ever smoke?
When I drink, I smoke, yeah.
You do?
Occasionally. I'm not a regular smoker, but if I'm out and I'm having a few beers, I may smoke.
There was a timeline on that.
Okay. When was your last cigarette, Mr. Southern?
Maybe a few weeks ago.
See, you need to stop because it's bad for you.
It's just a casual
social smoking.
I grew up on a tobacco farm, so I have no comment on the pros and or cons.
But I've noticed a lot of, I have a lot of radio people over, and there's a certain texture to a voice, which is a part of I won't even swear on this show, but because I can't swear in front of Scott, you understand? But there's a texture to a voice that it always comes back to smoking cigarettes. And it's almost enough to make me want to start.
Mark Daly, was a big smoker.
No, Scott says don't start. Don't start. Mark Daly, right? Okay, the voice himself. But Paul Cook, he doesn't smoke anymore, but he also attributes those pipes to cigarettes.
And by the way, Scott is well versed in how much I can swear when we golf.
Oh, yeah.
You can swear.
It's somewhat shocking, the commentary that comes out of.
Well, feel free
to
swear.
And I hate saying about the smoking in front of Scott, because Scott, especially when he worked in the newsroom with me as news director, is very much a great father figure. So I hated to disappoint Scott.
And he would tell you, Richard, put out that cigarette. Richard, do you know what smoking does to your health here? Okay.
I hate to disappoint him.
So we have, 680 CFTR stood for possibly maybe as a tribute to his father, Canada's first Ted Rogers. See, I always thought TR was for Toronto.
It can be many things, but that's how Ted imagined it when he chose those call letters.
Okay, so tell me a little more about 680.
So you played a little bit of the John Stahl clip yesterday. And out of context, it's like, what is he talking about?
Yeah, it needs context.
In context, it's a great story. So what happened is 680 on the AM dial, powerful signal. So Ted had to convince other nearby radio stations to move off the 680 dial position so that he could just blast it across Ontario and into the States.
Right.
So he got CHLO in St. Thomas, Ontario to change, and he paid for that. But there was another station across the lake in Rochester, New York, that he had real trouble getting to change the frequency. So in his book, which is titled Relentless, Ted told a story about how he managed to get that done. So here's, in context, John Stahl, 680's John Stahl, reading that passage from the book in Ted's own words.
Because of the reach of Rochester's WRVM, also at 680 on the dial, We couldn't broadcast at full power during the day unless that station moved to another frequency. The owner of WRVM was a Detroit businessman named Milton Maltz, who would later go on to found both the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and Museum in Cleveland and the International Spy Museum in Washington, D.C. I called Maltz, but he would not entertain the idea of moving the station, and he eventually stopped taking my calls. But a broadcast convention was coming up in Washington, and I found out from his assistant which flight Maltz would be on. He had a stopover in Cleveland, so I headed down there and booked a ticket on Maltz's flight to Washington. I asked the attendant if I could sit beside my pal Milton, and she said that seat was available. If you don't ask, you don't get, as I have learned time and time again. When I boarded the plane and sat down beside Maltz, he went berserk, saying, "You're hounding me, Rogers, you're hounding me. I can't go anywhere without you calling, and now you sit down beside me on an airplane." At this point, he actually took off his shoe and pounded it on the armrest of his seat like Nikita Khrushchev at the United Nations. But before we landed in Washington, I had won him over. He said my persistence was driving him crazy, and he would move the Rochester station on the dial if I paid for the switch and bought him the land that he would need for new transmitters. I gladly did so.
This is history I did not know. Fascinating. Fascinating.
It is a fascinating story, and that's the kind of guy Ted was. He was creative and brave.
And you talk about blasting the station out. One of the coolest things about my 16 years there was, and this happened a few times, as you know, Scott, was I received an MP3 or a CD from a gentleman in England, one of these DXer guys who likes to pick up the station. And it's me doing the overnight news. You know, overnight, 680 will just boom in the right conditions right across the Atlantic. It's very, very cool.
What a signal. Now, my station of choice in primary school, so most of the 80s, I'd say, was 680 CFTR. I loved my Tom Rivers in the morning. That was a big deal for me.
He was great.
How have we lost you? We've lost Mike. We need to get Mike back on 680.
You didn't listen to me. If I'm in a car, I will still tune in 680. But, you know, like I choose other programming for the bike rides. But again, there's no station I root harder for than 680 with all these sweetheart FOTMs working there. You know that. So go hard, 680. Long may you run. And although I haven't quite adapted, I'm still calling it 680 News. And then I'm catching myself and remembering it's City News 680. Yeah. That's how powerful that branding is. We'll get to that. But yeah, a big signal I used to listen to as a kid. I think somewhere here, Evelyn Macco gave me a 680 like towel thing, and it's proudly here alongside the Fan 1430 binders. So love 680.
That fits right in with the next clip, which is very brief. So CFTR became a popular music station in the 70s and 80s. So here's a sample of the station from 1973 with a DJ known as Rick Allen.
CFTR, here we go. I'll take the fifth call now at 870-9181 to instantly rip me off for 2 tickets to the Labatt's Can-Am and Mosport.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, Arch.
I'm on the Bill of the Thrills.
That's brilliant.
Now, I know I happen to know the spoiler here, which we'll let you announce, but I'm listening to that clip, and I guess it does sound like him. Yeah, it sounds like him. I knew he did a lot of things, so maybe we'll get the big reveal here. Who wants to guess the other name by which Rick Allen is known? Okay, well,
I've heard this clip too, and I can't remember now.
Oh, really?
No.
Okay, Richard.
Roger Ashby?
No, he was Roger at that point. But Rick Allen, of course, is Rick Moranis.
Oh.
Rob Cowan's buddy.
Yes. Oh, yes, exactly. The Rob Cowan episode. There's some great Rick Allen, Rick Moranis stories in that one. Absolutely.
Oh, wait a minute.
What's happening here?
Is walking in.
I think
Wait, okay, ladies and gentlemen.
It is.
The Palma Pass.
You know, you were supposed to come in the side door.
What do you mean?
I had a jar for you to burst in like the Kool-Aid man. You came in the front?
I walked in and terrified Monica.
I bet you. Was she dressed? I hope so. My goodness gracious. No, for your sake, maybe not.
Hi, Peter Gross. I haven't seen Peter
Ladies and
Gross in so
gentlemen,
long.
How are
Peter
you?
Gross
Pull up
is
a chair.
here.
Nice to see
There's
you.
a chair for you, and these headphones are for you, Peter. I want you to hear.
Excuse me for 1 minute.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
So everybody, the special guest.
He needs to go place a bet. He'll be right back.
I didn't promote this. but
Close the door.
Off track betting.
Mike Eppel did get the clues, right? Which episode did I reveal the special guest?
Was
Mike
it not
Eppel?
in the
It was somewhere.
Harold
Harold
Hussein episode?
That was like to see who's paying attention.
Yeah.
But absolutely. So, ladies and gentlemen, Peter Gross is going to join us, and that's great because he's here in time for the clip we're going to play where he's the second voice we hear on the station. So, Rick Moranis. I knew Rick Allen was on Chum FM because Ingrid Schumacher came over and talked about training him on the board at Chum FM. I don't think I knew till right now that Rick Allen was on CFTR.
Yeah, well, I think that's where is that where he worked with Rob, or was he at CKFH? Like a lot of those guys, especially in that time, they moved around a lot.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And they even do now.
Great clip though that you have that. That's wild.
Love that.
Okay.
All right, let's get to
Moranis.
one more clip in before Peter comes back because Peter's on the second clip. So there were a lot of people involved in getting 680 News off the ground. John Hinnon was one of the really key people. So Ted absolutely had to say yes to have it started, but Hinnon was the guy who was there day after day thinking about it 24/7 and helped to make it what it is today. So on the 30th anniversary podcast, City News 680, 30 years in the rearview mirror, John Hinnon talked about how important it was to have the support of Ted Rogers.
And his goal was always to try and buy back CFRB. That was originally one of his goals. And it wasn't until much later, I would say 2005 or 7, whatever, once 680 became like, a major behemoth from both a ratings and a revenue standpoint, that he said to me, "What? I don't think I have to buy CFRB anymore." So he backed off on that. But you know what? If it wasn't for Ted Rogers, this would not have happened. I mean, that was a great thing about having an owner like that who could make those decisions. There wasn't a big conglomerate behind him telling him what to do. And, he didn't care if he lost some money the first few years. He didn't care about that. It was not a big deal because if in fact the big win at the end was there, that's what he was looking at.
That's a great clip too.
Yeah, it is. Yep.
Wow. It's funny to hear this reference to, and there's no big conglomerate because that's the way it is today, right? Okay. So
what conglomerate? I don't see any conglomerates around here.
It's something special. So I will tell the listenership that I have, I can only plug 4 mics into this board, and I'm keeping one for myself.
It's very exciting to see Peter.
You know
I haven't
what?
seen Peter in a while.
You're excited to see me,
I
Richard.
am. I really like Peter. I love Peter.
Richard, do you know that Peter Gross is in the FOTM Hall of Fame?
I did know that. He's a legend in many realms.
God bless you.
He's not
Peter
he's
Gross.
not in the betting Hall of Fame though. He kind of struck out on that one.
He's showing great restraint there. How did you do with Jim McKenney when you were in this?
Saratoga.
Well, I'm glad you asked that because the August 2023 issue of Down the Stretch is now online with about a 3,000-word essay on how McKenney and I did.
Oh, you mean the printed Down the Stretch? Because people think you're talking about the podcast.
Not the podcast.
Okay.
But we did a whole podcast on it. And I needed both the podcast and the paper to
cut to. How much did you lose, Peter?
exemplify. Lots.
Yeah.
Terrible
we need a number.
At one point, I had bet 43 races,
Jesus.
and I'd cashed once.
Oh my God!
And the one
You're
was
hemorrhaging.
the one was a $1 exactor that paid $26. So it was extremely expensive and frustrating. It picked up somewhat after that particular.
That's a great
moment.
episode of Down the Stretch. So I'll shout out Down the Stretch, a great podcast, and people should listen to it. It's all about Ontario horse racing. Peter does a great job. Peter, I can tell by your losses there, you probably haven't had a meal in a while. So here's what I'm going to do, okay? Here's what I'm going to do. 1, 2, 3, 4. There's 4 adult men in this basement right now, and each of you are going to get a large lasagna. It's in my freezer right now from Palma Pasta. Peter, you're getting a pasta.
Wow.
Well, that was the incentive for coming, not to chat with
with
these
prices at the grocery store these days.
Tell him what I admitted when I came up
Well,
on the
Eppel
sidewalk.
brought he made sure to bring a backpack so that he can bring home his Palma Pasta lasagna.
He's carrying it all the way back to Whitby.
Yeah, and I'm going to go on the GO train,
Mimico
so it's going to
Ghost.
be weird if I'm carrying this bag of Palma Pasta. Now, you've seen my tweets about stopping at the Mississauga location of Palma Pasta.
So let's
and
make
loading
sure
up.
Anthony knows. So did you learn about Palma Pasta from Toronto Mike?
Yes. That's
Hey,
exactly
I love
where
to hear that.
I learned. And every time I drive through
Mississauga,
I pick up a month's supply
You know, if
it lasts that long.
If you
Scott
keep
and I
this
want a
up-
taste of this Palma pasta money, too. Come on.
You haven't had this lasagna?
Oh, I have. It's
Oh,
fantastic.
oh,
yeah.
amazing,
There's a
amazing.
store in Oakville. So I've been there, and it's fantastic.
Okay, man. Yeah, don't forget to swing that mic back and forth. It's going to be awkward for you, but it's going to sound great for the listenership, and that's all that matters. So, Peter, I'm glad you're here. You're all getting the Palma pasta. I know, Peter, you're not a big beer guy, but there is Great Lakes beer for you guys to bring home with you as well. So shout out to Great Lakes beer. And because I'm mentioning this, I'm just going to ask a very important question to you, gentlemen. Who in this room is going to be at TMLX 13 on September 7th at 6 to 9 p.m. at Great Lakes Brewery in Southern Etobicoke?
Wait, it's September 7th?
Yeah.
Did it change?
So you don't? Yeah, Eppel. This is yes. It did.
told you, he's a big fanboy.
He's a big fanboy, but he didn't pick up the change. But
I'm confused.
Yes, it is the 7th. You didn't get that memo because I thought I was broad telling everybody far and wide that I had to move the date.
Okay.
7. Can you make it anymore?
Yes.
Okay. So
Yes, I knew
is
it was a
Thursday.
Thursday. I thought it was
know.
next Thursday.
It was and
followed
then-
by.
I'm glad we had this
getting
talk
hip to the
then.
hip. I was just coming back and forth. Basically,
I'm glad that we had
Thirsty
this talk.
Thursday.
So
I'm in.
Eppel's going to be there. Richard, will you be there?
It's Thirsty Thursday. It's pub night. I'm in.
Yeah, so you're going to get your first beer on the house, courtesy of Great Lakes, and you're going to get Palma Pasta is going to feed you. And it's going to be a cool event because we're going to have a cool vibe, man. FOTMs are just going to collect, eat, drink, chat with each other. Will Peter Gross be there?
Special guest.
Put me down as a big maybe.
What do you mean? Why can't you be there? What do you got going on the September 7th, 6 to 9 p.m.?
Honestly,
I don't know.
You'll be there because
be
people
there.
will pay.
I'm going.
What are you going to bully me into it?
I'm going to bully you into it.
Okay, if Apple's going, I'm going.
Okay,
if I'm driving from Whitby,
yeah, you're a Mississauga guy.
I'm driving
Peter.
from Mississauga. It's like 6 kilometers.
Oh, the hardship.
You know who's going to be there?
You're
Brad
fine.
Jones from Ridley Funeral Home. I want to shout out Brad Jones and his awesome podcast, Life's Undertaking. So shout out to Ridley Funeral Home. Okay, I'm glad Peter's here for this.
So are these beers, by the way, are these chilled? Yes.
Well, do you want me to run during this clip, which I heard yesterday,
Yes.
because I played yesterday, I can run up and get you a cold one. So you want a lager?
Whatever.
Anyone else want a cold beer?
Sure. Sign me up.
I'm off
Sign
the
me up.
clock, so.
Okay, I'm bringing down, so 3 beers will come down during this clip.
Sure.
But I'm going to get that mic back to Scott, because Scott's going to set up this
Set it
clip.
up, yeah. All right, so this is the start of 680. So Sandy Sanderson was the program director for CFTR. He decided that the last song that would be played when they switched from music to all news would be We Built This City on Rock and Roll by Jefferson Starship, Mike's favorite song. And so on June 7th, 1993, Sanderson officially introduced 680 News.
Good morning. I'm Sandy Sanderson, Executive Vice President and General Manager of CFTR. This is a sad yet exciting moment in the history of this incredible radio station. It marks the end of one era and the beginning of a new one. And like all major transitions, it involves mixed emotions. For nearly a quarter of a century, CFTR has been a powerhouse of today's music, appealing to a large and vibrant audience. Over the past several years, however, the popularity of contemporary music on the AM band has diminished, and we find ourselves in a situation that requires a change. Effective immediately, CFTR will become known as 680 News, providing Toronto with an innovative information service that has never been available in this city or in this country before. In the next few months, you'll become aware of how the new 680 News will work for you, and I'm confident it'll soon become part of your day. It's been a fabulous 22 years, and on behalf of the entire staff of CFTR, thank you for your generous support over the years. I'm sure the next 22 will prove to be just as exciting and challenging. But for now, this chapter has ended, and it's time to move on. Farewell to the old, hello to the news.
This is 680 News. Good morning. It's 14 degrees at 6 o'clock on this Monday, June the 7th. I'm Dick Smythe, and here's what's happening. There will be normal GO Transit service this morning. Service on the weekend was normal as well. Prime Minister Brian Mulroney, 1 week left in power, said farewell at Baie-Comeau, Quebec last night. Canada's first all-news radio station is on the air. All news all the time. After a Sunday of meetings, Premier Bob Ray says that his goal remains the same, to trim $2 billion from provincial expenditures. Morning showers, then sunny and warm. More rain forecast for tonight.
I'm Peter Gross in sports. Jack Morris was himself yesterday. Unfortunately, big upset in the French Open and a miracle finish in men's golf.
This is John Hinnon with business. The Nikkei is down 38 points, gold is down $2, and the bank rate is expected to increase tomorrow.
Now traffic and weather every 10 minutes on the ones. First for the check of 680 News Cantel Traffic, here's Russ Holden.
Thank you, Dick. Good morning. Traffic around Metro just starting to fill in. Roads are a little bit wet, some light rain persisting, and as a result, roads could be a little bit slippery, but no problems to tell you about so far. Accident-free TTC routes, they're all just beginning to build. Reasonable start to the morning, and we'll have another update in 10 minutes.
A disturbance passing southern Ontario is bringing cloudy skies and a chance of showers this morning, about a 30% chance. That disturbance will pass through the area quite quickly. Following that, we'll have a mix of sun and cloud for the rest of the day. Winds will be light today, and a high of 24 degrees is expected. That's 2 degrees above normal. This evening, an overnight cloud on the increase. There is of rain beginning just before dawn, overnight low of 14 degrees. I'm Michelle Skinner from the Weather Network for 680 News.
Okay, so, and Dick Smythe talked about this in the podcast, City News 680, 30 years in their rearview mirror, another plug.
Available wherever you get your podcasts.
And Dick, I think what happened was Dick Smythe pressed his mic button to turn it back on. Somebody in a control room pressed it at the same time, and they kind of neutralized each other. So his mic didn't come back on. So he kept broadcasting. Peter may remember this. He kept broadcasting, and it took them like a few seconds to figure it out. So it was a little bit of a rough start, but since then it's been...
In the newsroom, I remember just hearing the ticker underneath, but no voice. And everybody's kind of going, are we on the air?
Yeah, you can't even tell. Like I've heard that so many times. It doesn't. I can't even tell there was a mistake in there. Actually, it sounds good. I love the fact that the first voice spoken on 680 News by somebody still with us is the gentleman in my basement right now, the great Peter Gross.
I've got to tell you that moment with Dick, the start of 680 News, is one of like the 5 greatest moments of my life.
Count them down for us.
Well, the other 4 were like sex with girls. But
all 4 times?
The same one 4 times. I was quite nervous, and I'm sort of like sitting beside Dick in this little broadcast booth, just thinking about just say what you want to say and say it properly. And I'm being very much in myself, and then the music comes on and suddenly there goes Dick. Good morning. It's Dick. Just exploding. I mean, I almost rocked me out of my chair. Wow. I'll never forget that.
So you were nervous, even though you had all those years at City TV under your belt. You were still nervous there for the.
I often got nervous before going on the air. I found it was a real good kind of energy to have.
Well, you know what cures nerves? A good nap.
Yeah.
I never saw Peter nap, but I did see Peter bet on horse races in between newscasts.
What are you referring to?
Well, we'll get back to the nap. Hold on. Richard Southern just dropped a truth bomb there.
Yeah.
So you witnessed on the clock. Now, you don't have any severance owed to you by Rogers. It's all
right. You're good?
Scott, were you at all involved in...
He wasn't involved in any of that.
In the decapitation of me from 680.
Did Scott fire you?
No. Amber did, and I think it was I made it uncomfortable for her, and I regret that.
She had no choice.
I very much orchestrated my own exit from 680 News, and Mike actually on a couple of occasions said, Mike Eppel said, this is not a good look on you. I guess I'd grown
to warn you.
Yeah, he warned me. You can't be playing the horses between sportscasts.
It was great, though. I enjoyed watching him do that.
Well, there were occasions when the sound of certain things would emanate from the computer that you were on.
Is that pornography, Mike?
No.
It was like international off-track horse races.
Okay. See, this is the difference between the sanctioned 680 podcast and my show.
I need to open this beer.
Okay, on the mic though, Mike Eppel.
Okay, here we go.
So Mike Eppel opening a Great Lakes lager.
Cheers.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, and again,
Scott, there's no
smoking in here.
Oh, I can't fire one up?
No darts.
That's why you were in the backyard last time, so you could spark one up. Hold on, I have a beer too here, so I want to crack one open. And I feel bad. Actually, my original vision was that Mike Eppel and Peter Gross would share a mic, but I see how difficult that is with the.
I can share with Scott here too. Cheers, Mike. Thanks for having us.
Okay, thank you. And Peter, I goof around about the fact you were caught napping when they would.
There were actually
like Amber. I haven't met Amber, but I don't think she had a choice, right? Like if your sports guy is asleep when they go to him.
That's
well,
sort of.
No, I argued long and hard that there was nothing in my contract that said I had to be awake. Okay.
How did that go for you?
In this day and age, you need to specify that. The truth is, twice at 9:45. Keep in mind that I was in there at 2:00 in the morning, and I was filing sportscasts to Kitchener, Ottawa, Halifax, and then doing, and it just, I think it wore me down, and a couple times I put,
and specified to each individual market. I don't want to underplay how hard it is to do
the Ottawa
sports
67s
on 680 and for all of the other affiliates.
Incredibly hard.
It is difficult.
The workload.
Try getting up at 3 a.m. for 30 years.
And
I take a nap.
So a couple times I put my feet up, and sure enough, it was 9:45 both times. And now Sports and Peter Gross just dead air.
And I'd run down the hall and say, Peter.
Yeah. No, I remember Samantha Knight coming in at 10 to 10. Peter. So that was embarrassing, and I suppose the whole collection of events justified.
I would argue your audio content was some of the most creative, though.
I agree.
Well, thank you.
And that was 93, right? So that's Jack Morris's off year.
He still had his wit there,
because in 92, Jack Morris had 20. I think he had 21 wins or something like that. What is that, Peter Gross?
Someone keeps calling me, and I have to keep.
But what is that ringtone we heard there? It sounds like you're slaughtering a goat.
Yeah, I don't.
So the initial, where we were on the first days or the first few years, really, of 680 on Victoria Street, right? That was a very different environment from where it is today in the Rogers complex. And I just remember coming in as a newbie after they had announced the format change and the rock and roll DJs had been let go, and how that newsroom was not really built for an all news format. I mean, it was actually, for its time, was actually fairly sizable, but at the time, considering the amount of people that were involved, it was very cramped.
Oh, we built this newsroom. Okay,
Yeah.
swing that mic to Scott for a second, because Scott, can you speak to the gravitas? You can hear it in the voice, but having somebody like Dick Smythe as your lead news guy when you start the all news station.
Yeah, as Peter said, he was almost knocked off his chair. Paul Cook often refers to Dick Smythe's voice as rolling thunder.
Mm-hmm.
And it really is. He just rolled out of the speaker. But he was also a great writer. And the other point I would like to make now, and we'll hear hopefully later, is one of the best writers that's ever worked in broadcasting in Toronto is Peter Gross.
Well, I've heard this from Fred Patterson from Humble and Fred, who used to do his sports commentaries on CFNY back in the 80s into the 90s, that he said he was inspired by the writing of Peter Gross. Like, he has told me that.
Yeah, he's unique and rare, and I would think.
Aren't you glad you're here, Peter?
It would be.
This is your funeral, okay?
Let's do a plug. Yeah, that's right.
Ridley Funeral Home.
Ridley Funeral. Shout out. But Mike, in your world of podcasting, and I know you've done something with Peter before with John Gallagher, but I think there's room. I think there's room for somewhere for Peter to shine again.
100%
with his writing in some format. I don't know what it is. I'm not taking on that project.
Well, just for the record, he does have a podcast to this day called Down the Stretch, and you write that and you voice that, and it's.
I would put him on an all sports radio station for an hour. I think that would be an incredible hour of radio every day.
No, I disagree with you about that.
Because you'll be napping.
No.
If you're awake, it would be great.
My approach to sports was always, it was something I could fool around with. It was something that I could be entertaining with. And at some point, 680 News, and I disagreed on the content. And that was one of many issues that led to my demise there. But
can you run down those issues that led to your demise there?
We want to hear all of them.
There was a definitive point where I grew weary of the subject material. and it showed in my work, and it showed in my attitude. And it really, I haven't spent a day thinking, oh, I lost that wonderful job, and I have no desire to be a sportscaster.
You don't regret this. You have no regrets.
No.
I love Peter Gross. No regrets.
The year, I would have to say the 4 years since I was let go by 680 News have been the most interesting years of my life. The year after was fantastic because they gave me a handsome envelope and I spent most of it on trips, not on drugs, but on
Saratoga.
No, this man, for the record, is not. You haven't done any drugs since the 80s, right? No, just for the record.
Peter had great drug stories, though. I enjoyed hearing those.
There's good. Listen, if you want to do a show about drugs and gambling, and
we had a show like that. Yeah. It was called Gallagher and Gross. Yeah, I can only see when Amber LeBlanc tunes in. I can't wait to hear how the guy sounded on Toronto Mike. I wonder how she's going to feel about the hour we spent talking about all the reasons that Peter Gross was fired.
To bring it back to the clip you last played,
I love that clip.
The first time we heard 680, what strikes me about that is that it's not exactly the same, but you can still hear today's format there. And that's what's the key to success about this station is that it is, the content changes, obviously, the news changes every hour, but the format is rigid. As a listener, if you want to hear something, when it's going to be on. Sports is going to be on at 15 or business is going to be on at 26 past the hour. You heard that right on day one and you still hear that. And that's what struck me about that.
Actually, Scott, you could attest to this. Weren't we originally on a 20-minute cycle?
Right.
Okay, swing that back. I want to hear Scott talk to this because we did touch on this with Paul Cook and Stephanie Smythe yesterday. But how has the format of 680 evolved from 1993 to 2023?
Yeah, well, when it started, it was based on the WINS New York format, which is every 20 minutes there'd be one anchor for 20 minutes doing the newscasts. The other station in New York,
WCBS.
What they did was half hours. So they would have two hosts on at the same time and sort of talking back and forth and kibitzing a bit and throwing to each other. And it was really more of a personable, and it allowed for a little more personality. So they did that in Vancouver when they started News 1130 in 1996, and they liked how it sounded. And then they decided, let's change in 680. And that was a big decision, right? You've already got this thing rolling. And they said, no, let's do it this way. And that's where we are now. And it sounds terrific.
I mean, I listen to the U.S. all news channels from time to time. And, obviously I'm biased, but it doesn't sound nearly as good to me. There's not that flow that we have. Even though we have this rigid format, there's still some room for personalities like Peter's or Mike's to shine through. And I think that's the key to success at 680, where you have these personalities, but you're also sticking to this format that everyone knows and likes.
While we're in the 1990s, because we're going to talk about what I believe, and I said this to Stephanie Smythe yesterday, like we can live to be 300 years old and we'll still might have the same answer for what was the biggest news day here. So we're going to talk about that fateful day in 2007 in a moment. But while we're in the 90s, I have a question here about the 1996 Olympics. Paul Cook was at the 1992 Olympics in Barcelona, I believe. And I'm always interested in 96 because that's the Donovan Bailey Olympics when he wins gold in the 100 meters and then we win gold in the 4x100 meters and Donovan Bailey gets the world record. He was the fastest man in the world. And Paul Cook remarked that Peter Gross was in Atlanta for that. And then I learned that Paul had forgotten that Peter Gross was not alone in Atlanta. Who else was with you, Peter Gross?
Mr. Mike Eppel.
Eppel, why doesn't Paul Cook remember your contribution?
Because I was only there for 4 days to start. Peter stayed the entire time. You were there were you there for both weeks or 10 days?
10 days to 14.
Anyway, I only went to start because that was really the first Olympics where it was a massive corporate event. So in Atlanta,
Coca-Cola.
and they built this entire area of corporate tents. And so, as the business editor, we had an extra seat and some tickets, so I tagged along.
You two at the Olympics. So when does the bombing happen in Atlanta?
After I left.
After you left, okay.
After I left.
I was staying in a hotel in Buckhead. Make sure you pronounce that correctly, which is kind of like staying in Markham for events at.
Look, I don't pronounce
Rogers
any
Center.
words correctly. So.
Yeah. So it was about 30 miles. What was interesting was I had these gigantic press credentials, and I found I could walk out in the street, stick my thumb out, and I'd get a ride immediately. And women would pick you up. So I got picked up several times by women.
Well, that's new for you.
Yeah.
No, the Atlanta games were interesting. They were a gong show from a transportation standpoint.
But the night of the bombing, I had worked all day. It was very warm. I was carrying around a very heavy. God, the tape recorders were heavy in those days. Yeah.
The big Marantz machines.
Yeah.
Later, I'll tell you where you can get them recycled.
I mean, now I can do that.
What's
on
a
my
tape
phone.
recorder?
Yeah.
Richard's the young one in the room.
So I get back to Buckhead. I was up at 7 a.m, back to Buckhead near midnight, trying to get to sleep, and then I'm looking at CNN at 1, and they start talking about the bombing at Centennial Park, and I remember just staring at the phone, thinking, this phone is going to ring. And sure, in 5 minutes, 680 News calls me. And so I go on the phone and simply reiterate what I was seeing on CNN. And the next morning,
We're live from my hotel room.
Yeah.
CNN is reporting.
Exactly. And then the next day was probably the most unpleasant, uninteresting day I've ever spent reporting. I was at Centennial Park from maybe 8:30 in the morning to mid-afternoon, giving the same report because I had no information. There's a very heavy police presence here.
Welcome to my world.
Yeah, blah, 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 blah. And the worst experience was, so Vancouver, what's the call letters for Vancouver?
11:30.
11:30. They learned that they had a reporter live at the scene for the biggest story of the year.
Right.
So I get on the phone to Vancouver. They put me on hold for 35 minutes while they did stories about renaming a park and traffic signs will be changed here and after 35 minutes as the juice on my phone is, and so I gave them there's a real police presence here, very solemn.
This was well before the age of the iPhone.
Dear.
And it was hot. It was very hot.
By the way,
that summer.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
The movie was very good. What's the movie?
Richard Jewell.
Richard Jewell. Yeah, very well done.
Yeah, well, that he's a great director. But very interesting that you were there on the scene, and you were also live at the 100-meter final.
No, I wasn't. I know you want
time out. Let me just say time out.
And there's a reason why I wasn't live.
Please, there better be a reason.
Yeah, there was a reason.
Because they sent you down there
on the very first day. What was the nice redheaded girl who got a medal in cycling? And
Clara Hughes.
Thank you, Clara Hughes.
She's a two-sport.
And so I went to this event. She was there, and I interviewed her, and I wasn't supposed to. And so they took my credentials away from me.
Really?
We didn't have broadcast rights.
They stripped me of my
credentials. I think we went live from the opening ceremonies.
CBC had broadcast.
Yeah, I think we went live from the opening ceremonies when Muhammad Ali lit the torch and the
so Peter,
flame.
I understand. Okay, so you're there as a member of the press, obviously, but you're not a rights holder. So you didn't have permission to talk to Clara Hughes at that point, or what did you do?
I'd have to argue that I didn't realize that I didn't.
I know you can plead ignorance because that's got you this far in life. But is that the violation you were accused of?
Yeah, I think so. And
you couldn't get into the building.
No, I continued to get into buildings because my pass still worked.
So why weren't you there for the biggest moment, Olympic? Probably next to maybe winning gold in Vancouver in 2010. I'm trying to think of what's a bigger Olympic moment than Donovan Bailey winning the 100 meters in Atlanta. Like, I'm angry you were there. I can't believe you held the job that long. You weren't even there.
Possibly one of the reasons that I'm no longer.
That's worse than the sleeping. That's definitely worse.
20 plus years after the fact.
Probably because
quite a revelation.
Probably because that happened late in the evening, and I'd been up since 7 a.m. filing. And to my credit, I file 10 to 15 stories a day.
Can I speak to Scott Metcalfe for a moment here? Swing that mic around. So Scott. What was your role in '96 at?
I was not at 680 News.
You had nothing to do with this.
No,
you're smart to wash your hands of this.
590.
Okay,
so over to you, Peter.
Anyways, we'll move on from this. But I was pretty certain you would have been there because if 680 sending somebody to the Olympics in Atlanta, and the big event for Canadians is the 100
Listen,
meters.
I'm sure that from my hotel room I called in and said, "Wonderful moment for Canada."
He was so fast.
It took
Wow.
him much less time to cover the 100 meters than it's going to take me to tell you about it.
Shout out to Donovan Bailey. His podcast is called Donovan Bailey Running Things, and we're going to recap the World Championships that just happened in Budapest. We're going to do that tomorrow. So Jason Portwando, who, by the way, I learned Jason Portwando roomed in college. He was a roommate of Carl Hansky. Isn't that a mind blow for you? Isn't that wild? And I'm every week. And the other fun fact is that Jason Portwando would be seen on TSN, and I only know him because of Peter Gross, because he's a big horse racing guy.
And the other fun fact.
Well, let me finish mine first.
Okay.
So Jason Portwando could be seen at, now it's called King's Plate, but maybe if there's a Queen's Plate, it would typically be, back in the day, Jason Portwando and Laura Dykin. This would be the duo on TV, on TSN, covering it. Laura Dykin's dad lives across the street.
There's too many 6 degrees of separation here.
And Bojan is down the street, and Mike Eppel is right here.
Oh.
Look at that. They're only a few houses apart. Go
Anyways,
ahead, Peter.
the update about Jason Portwando is he's now a steward. He's a judge on the 6th floor, deciding whether or not to disqualify horses.
Right.
So every time my horse is interfered with,
his fault.
I have to text him and say, "Do not take that horse down."
Wow, he's going to love that getting aired. Okay, well, Jason Portwando, honorable guy. I would trust him as a judge. Can he marry people?
No, well,
No, I'm just goofing. Okay. Let's move on. So,
yes.
That's all fun and games, not the bombing, of course, but the fact that Peter called the Donovan Bailey race from his hotel room in Buckhead, that's amazing. That's my favorite Peter Gross story. That's amazing. Did you know this, Mike Eppel?
I have a vague recollection of it. Again, it was a while
But
ago.
Richard Southern, you're learning this for the first time.
I was in short pants back
That's
then.
right.
Yeah, you were in grade school.
I love that we were having a very nice 680 conversation. Then you invite the one guy, one of the few people we've let go. That's why I love Toronto.
You know
Mike.
why? You know
That's
why?
I love you.
You know why? Because Rogers did not cut a check for this event. So this is Toronto Mike time. Okay.
Yeah.
Scott, let's sober up here for a moment as we enjoy our Great Lakes beer, because on September 11th, 2001, we all know what happened that day. Tell me about 680 News prior to that day. Like, was it profitable from the get-go?
No, it wasn't. And in the City News 680, 30 years in the Rearview Mirror podcast, I mean, how many times can I say that?
What's the name of that again?
Is
Peter Gross on that podcast?
No.
You know what?
His
That's an
voice
oversight.
is. His voice is.
Always voice. But recording of his voice from back in the day.
Yeah.
Okay.
But anyway, what the station took a few years to be profitable, but Tony Viner, who was the general manager at the time, tells the story that he had the opportunity to call Ted to tell Ted that 680 had actually passed CFRB in the ratings. And Ted had wanted to buy CFRB, decided that he just let CFTR run 680 News and see if he could pass CFRB. And the station did. Had higher ratings. And Tony said he called Ted to tell him that, and he said Ted was absolutely giddy. That's the word Tony used. He was giddy.
Well, it is
That's
amazing.
how much it meant to him.
Because CFRB is such a juggernaut in this city.
It was for
yeah.
years and years and
Right.
decades.
Yeah. And also mention Phil Lind,
Yep.
who we just lost this past weekend at the age of 80, passed
Right.
away. He was instrumental with Tony Viner to convince Ted to do the format. They talked about it losing money, 3, 4.
Well, I
5
heard the
years,
story.
maybe?
Maybe Scott can speak to this. I heard that there was almost a race between 640 and 680 as to who was going to go all news first. Did
I
you hear
think
this?
AM radio, you couldn't play music on it and make much money. So all the radio companies were looking at it. It was obvious. There were
Right.
sports stations in the U.S., there were news stations in the U.S., and they were looking at those options, and the fan went with sports.
Right.
Well, they had the rights to the Jays and the Leafs, so why not? That made perfect sense. And then 680 and 640, and there was even some talk of 1050 maybe thinking about going all talk, all news or whatever.
Well, at some point they tried it with the team.
Yep. And 680, yes, thanks to Ted saying, yep, you can lose some money, go ahead, do it. And Phil Lind was involved in that decision.
Wow, that's great. And if people want more of that history of 590, which was 1430 going all sports, that episode 1106, that's like your definitive history, the 30-year history of the fan, CJCL. So go to that episode with Scott Metcalfe. Peter, that's your homework. You're going to listen to the history of the CJCL episode 1106. Okay, let's go. I'm actually just yesterday when Stephanie Smythe and Paul Cook were here, we talked about that day. It was what a horrific day for humanity, but what an interesting day for people who are, active in the news media covering 9/11 on 9/11. So set this up for me.
Just play the clip.
All right, let's listen.
For mothers who have to work, the report says the government
This
should
just
help.
into 680 News. We now take you live via CNN to New York City, where it appears we have major problems with the World Trade Center.
So that was it. That's how it started. That was the first indication on 680 News that something had happened, because they were watching CNN in the news booth, and they saw what's going on there. And nobody knew at the time.
The smoke was billowing out.
Yeah,
of
nobody
one of the
knew that
towers.
it was a jetliner. They thought, it was a small plane, and you're looking up and seeing. And CNN was live, and we had rights to use CNN audio on air, so they just brought up CNN.
What gives me goosebumps about that as a news guy, I literally got goosebumps about listening to that again.
Yeah, me too.
Was the fact that, and we only do this if it's big, breaking into audio that's being played.
That's Paul Cook, right? So Paul Cook is mid-sentence, and then it's Marlene.
No, that was a report. That was a recorded report from an American story.
And those reports wouldn't be long. We normally wait.
Oh, it's not Paul Cook. I'm going to play. Do you mind? I'm going to play it again because I just want to hear it again.
For mothers who have to work, the report says the government
This
should help.
just into 680 News. We now take you live via CNN to New York City, where it appears we have major problems with the World Trade Center.
So that's Marlene Oliver?
Yes.
Okay, and that's Oliver with an I, unlike
Yes.
Fergie, who dropped that I at some point. Right. Okay, Marlene Oliver, and I guess that's just before 9 a.m. on September 11th, and that is when after the first plane hit the tower. And again, we talked about this quite a bit yesterday. People should check out Paul Cook and Stephanie Smythe on Toronto Mic'd. But most of us, like you just said, Scott, we're envisioning a Cessna accidentally getting off course and maybe flying into the World Trade Center.
Yeah, and Paul and Stephanie talked about that yesterday and in detail, and they decided, and I wasn't there at the time. I was at the Fan 590, and I remember that they sent Carl Hansky and Kevin Meisner immediately to New York. Now, the first thing was they were going to put them on a plane, but then everything shut down. So then John Hinnon and Stephanie Smythe said, "Get in the car and go." And they got across.
Well, let's listen to Stephanie, only because I know you sent this for me to play during Stephanie's visit, but let's listen now to 15 seconds of Stephanie Smythe talking about this.
I think it was something like, pack your underwear and get moving. It was just no question. We couldn't not be there. And we didn't know how or what or, exactly what was going to unfold when they got there, but it didn't matter. They just had to get on the road, and they were amazing, right? Just getting on the move and getting there and getting that perspective that we had to have. So it never really was a question of if, it's just how and get moving, and we'll figure it out as we go. Wow. And thankfully they were two absolute pros.
Yeah, Kevin Meisner and Carl Hansky were amazing. In the podcast, City News 680 podcast.
What's the name of that podcast again?
City News 680, 30 years in the rearview mirror.
But no Peter Gross from today.
There is not a specific interview, but Peter's voice is on there. Peter's voice is on there a number of times through the podcast. But
of course,
Kevin and Carl in the podcast, they're interviewed by Amber about their time covering 9/11, and their stories are phenomenal. And that's one of the reasons why I thought it was important to get these stories out there, because students who are interested in getting into journalism, these are great stories to listen to. Carl said he learned so much about reporting on the scene. Wow. And he talks about that. So anybody who's thinking of getting into that business, listen to that, because you can learn something from Kevin and Carl.
Wow. So when 680 News launches on June 7th, 1993, honky dory, you catch CFRB, you're building something here, but I'm guessing 9/11 is a moment where your ears on the station balloons.
Yeah, and the team there, Carl and Kevin and Paul Cook and Stephanie Smythe running the show, John Stahl, all the people who were working there at the time, they stayed on that story Mike, you would have. You
I was not there at that
CTV.
time. I was over at CTV at that point. Yeah.
Yep. So they would have stayed on that story, and they stayed on it for weeks and months. And that was a turning point for 680 News, where it became, in the diaries, before we went to the PPM meters, in the diaries, it became the most listened to radio station in Toronto.
It took 8 years to get there, though. Yeah.
Well, that makes sense. When the Blue Jays were launched in 77, they didn't make the playoffs till 85. It took them 8 years.
Yep.
So see what I did there? I brought it back to the
Yes.
drive of 85. That's my comfort zone here. I'm just glad 680 had the sense, don't send Peter Gross to New York. Because you know what would happen? He'd be in Hoboken, New Jersey or something watching CNN. Wow.
So anyway, I don't want to give it short shrift, but the Paul and Steph talk about it a lot, and there's a lot of it in the 680 podcast if anybody's interested in listening.
Wait, you guys have a
that.
podcast about your 30 years of
That's
680.
But I did want to move on because I know I don't want to run too long, but there's this one clip I really wanted to get to for sure, and it's about Gordon Lightfoot. And, he died on May 1st at the age of 84. So a few years after the launch of 680 News, Gordon Lightfoot ran into 680 News reporter Rudy Blair. So Rudy was out there, and he was talking to all the young people just starting up in the music. He was great for that, for promoting but he also talked to the stars. But he hadn't talked to Gord. And Gordon saw Rudy at an event. It might have been like a Juno Award event or whatever. And he came directly over to Rudy and said, "Hey, you and I have never had a one-on-one chat. Why don't we set that up?" And Rudy said, "Yeah, great, sure, whatever." So Gordon set it up. And
Gordon initiated that.
Yes.
That's amazing.
You know what? Gordon came to the station when Rudy another time interviewed him, and he was just like the sweetest guy.
He was a big fan.
He was a big fan.
He was a very big fan of 680.
And he was introduced to Leo Walker, who was doing business at the time. So, Leo Walker, I listen to you all the time. Like, he was a genuine fan of 680.
Who could blame him with all the sweethearts there?
So he got to know Rudy and they hit it off. So in February of 2010, there was a post on Twitter that Lightfoot had died at the age of 71.
Right.
And some CanWest media websites actually picked up the story and gave it life, and it went around the world. Now, we were holding off on it. We were saying, we don't have any proof. But we ran the story that there was a story. So we said, we can't confirm this, but there's this story out there, and we're doing our best to confirm it. So thanks to Rudy's connection with Gordon, he had Gordon's cell phone number. And so he was able to reach him. Gordon had been at the dentist and didn't know this was going on. So the co-anchors at the time, Brian Fisher, Catherine Jeté, and it was lifelong Lightfoot fan Brian Fisher who broke in with the good news on February 18th, 2010.
Well, this just into 680 News. The latest developments regarding this story we've been reporting on this afternoon. Reports from out west that singer-songwriter, Canadian icon Gordon Lightfoot had died. 680's music reporter Rudy Blair is joining us live right now with the latest. Rudy?
Yeah, do you want to talk about the latest? Excuse me, Mr. Gordon Lightfoot, are you there, please?
Yes, Rudy.
What is going on? I'm hearing about you dying, and then suddenly you finally get a chance to call. What is going on here?
All of a sudden, my music is in heavy rotation. All of a sudden, my music is on the air everywhere. I'm fine. I'm in great health. I'm doing just fine. I'm sitting in my office right now. The whole thing's a hoax.
Gordon, well, when did you hear about this? And when you did, what did you think about people talking about you died, but you're not dead?
Well, I started getting concerned about it because I heard it on the radio coming down here just a few minutes ago, and I very hurriedly rushed in here because our telephones are ringing off the hook here at the office, and the whole thing is it's just a hoax. That's all it is. I don't know where it came from or how it happened.
Gordon, have you had a chance to talk to any of your family members? Because I know we had heard that they're really upset about hearing this hoax.
Well, we're going to be getting calls here all afternoon, I'm sure, and I'm going to be talking to people, and I really appreciate the concern. It's I don't know what to make of it, but I hope that we'll find out. But I'm fine.
Okay, so your health is okay, everything's good, you're still touring, everybody's happy?
I'm just getting ready to go out on tour.
Oh, might as well promote it. Where are you going right now?
Well, I'm heading down to the southeast, actually. I'm playing 5 states down in the southeast, and we're doing 10 shows in 11 days. So I hope that I'm sure I'll be able to handle that okay.
Oh my goodness, Gordon, you have no idea. Man, I'm standing here and I'm shaking like a leaf because when I heard about this. Can you do me a favor? Can you wait a couple of more years before I have to do your obit, please?
Oh, yes, indeed, I will, Rudy. That's very kind of you.
Okay, my friend, I'll let you go. Thank you for calling into the 680 News Studios. Good to hear that you're still alive, my friend.
That's great.
Thank you.
Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
That's a great clip.
Yeah, that's one of my favorites. One of my favorites. And that a total tribute to Rudy having built a relationship with Gordon. That he
What happens anytime on Twitter and or X when you see a celebrity name trending, right?
yeah.
You're like,
No, just today I was on, I'm going to call it Twitter if that's okay if you, Mr. Eppel. But when I was on Twitter this morning, I saw Don Cherry's name was trending. And naturally, my first thought is, did Don Cherry die? Yeah. But he didn't die, everybody.
And there's an example of a station with a rigid format, yet, we can drop it and put Gordon Lightfoot on live, and Rudy can talk to him, and it's fun. You know what I mean?
No, that's a fantastic clip. And that was 2010, you tell me. Yeah. So the man, he went another 13 great years. And we sadly did just lose Gordon Lightfoot. Wow. There's quite a conversation with Dave Hodge in the Toronto Mike feed.
I listened to that, and that was spectacular. He told some great Gordon Lightfoot stories.
It's all Dave, man. Yeah, he was tearing up in that chat, and you can hear it. Yeah. It was something special. So he lost his friend Gord. Okay, so Mike, you told me you're going to Getting Hip to the Hip.
Yes, that's the plan.
Okay, did you use my promo code?
I did.
So good, you saved 10%.
I did.
Okay. Excellent.
Thank you.
No, well, thank you for using it. And I will, can I sit beside you?
Sure. Is this a sit down? No, this is not a sit down event, is it?
I don't actually think so. Tomorrow, you'll want to tune into this. Tomorrow morning, Jamie Dew, who's organizing the Getting Hip to the Hip event, is going to join me here. We're going to kick out our favorite covers of Tragically Hip songs. Jake's going to be mad at me because I just say, don't you think it's awkward? So I just said we're going to kick out our favorite covers of Tragically Hip songs. Don't you think it's awkward to say we're going to kick out our favorite covers of the Tragically Hip jams? Don't you think that it sounds better without the?
It's a good question.
You're a broadcaster.
Yeah. No, it's fine.
Seen you on
I think it's
Breakfast
fine.
Television.
I think it's fine either way.
Okay,
I don't think you have to be
you.
so specific. Yeah,
Jake disagrees with you. He wants the in there. So okay. So we're gonna kick out the Tragically Hip covers of the Tragically Hip, and we're gonna get the details. So he's gonna basically paint the picture so we can visualize this event because I know it's got a cover band. I know that Sean Cullen's gonna be there. He's a funny guy. He's an FOTM. And I know there's going to be a live recording of Getting Hip to the Hip, and I know this is for the Downey Wenjack Fund, and I know it's September 1st. And I know that it is, the promo code is FOTM10, FOTM10. You can save 10%. So tomorrow, Jamie Dew is going to explain everything. Is it a sit down? Is it a stand up? Regardless, Eppel, I want to be with you.
All right.
So everybody who's invited, Richard, we want to see you at Getting Hip to the Hip. Come on, get out there. Save 10%, FOTM10. Okay, one more event I'm going to tell you about here before we get back to these awesome 680 clips that Scott has sent me. Pumpkins After Dark. Okay, this is a big event. This is in Milton. Bring your kids, your grandkids, your uncles, your aunts, your cousins, everybody. Pumpkins After Dark. I have a promo code in August that saves you 15%. TO Mike 15. Go to pumpkinsafterdark.com. You get more details. We've been working with Pumpkins After Dark in the past, and then there's a pandemic, and then it became this thing where like a non-contact event. But now we're back to normal, everybody. It's in Milton, Ontario. And that event runs from, it runs to Halloween. When does it start? Do you know, Mike Eppel? You listen to Toronto.
No, but I've driven past it. It's just off the south side of the 401, right by the Agricultural Historical Museum grounds there.
Yes, sir. And it does start. I now have the dates here. September 23rd to October 31st. So by now, save 15% with TO Mike 15.
I've driven past and I've always gone, we should stop in and check this out because it looks quite impressive from the highway.
You got to buy your tickets in advance because the
lineups going in were long.
It's an award-winning event and it's damn cool. So everybody get your Halloween on there at Pumpkins.
You can bring your pumpkin spice latte to Pumpkins After Dark. It's on sale now.
Pumpkin Spice Latte Day.
Yeah.
Is that today?
Today.
Apparently so.
I celebrate it every year. This is exciting news.
It's too soon.
20 years today, yeah.
It's too early.
It is too early because kids aren't even back in school yet.
It needs to be after Labor Day.
Absolutely, because first get the kids back to school because when the X ends and we all go back to it, then you have like that's a demarcation line, and then you can kind of ease into this.
The other shocking thing about that, not to get off topic, is the fact that it's been around. It's been around 20 years.
There's a great pumpkin beer at Great Lakes that they.
I'm really enjoying this Great Lakes beer, by the way.
Okay, so that's good to hear because Great Lakes has ruined me for other beers. Like when I'm out and I'm at a restaurant that doesn't.
I'm disappointing Scott again. I hate this.
No, listen, you're allowed to drink. You're off the clock here. So today, let me ask you about today quickly here before we move on to the next clip. Mike, what hours did you work today?
I was up at 4 o'clock as I typically am. I am still working from home, going into the office once in a while. But where were you heard? Like in the Rogers family, where were you heard today? Where? Yes, exactly. Everywhere. Yeah. No, I was on BT and 680 this morning. And
yeah, that's the detail we wanted to get.
I was also heard in Vancouver, heard in Ottawa.
Oh yes, right,
Halifax,
of course. All the affiliates that we. Thank you, Richard, for reminding me of all the stations that we actually send content to.
Look at you,
because it's all that again. That has been the growth of the format, helped out by the fact that we can do all of this from a digital standpoint.
And 680 was so successful in Toronto that they duplicated it right across Canada.
When we started, it was all carts and reel to reel and all these other old. You didn't even work with reel to reel, did you, Southern?
No.
Well, Souther's like 28. He's 28 years old. Am I right, Richard?
So once we were able to send all of these things out digitally, that helped.
When I started, though, when we would go live in the field, we'd have a digital recorder, but we'd hold up the cell phone to the digital recorder to get. It was very. I mean, you heard the initial 680 clip, and the weather person was on the phone. So
where's that music coming from? Is that a ringtone?
I think it's from your phone.
Whose phone is that?
No, it's not my phone.
Oh, no.
Rose, is that your phone?
Who has a song as a ringtone in this room? Not that I'm angry.
Mine.
It is Mike Eppel.
What song is
I'm hearing
Mike?
music.
It's my this day on your photo stream from certain years, and you know how Apple puts in a musical background for some reason because it was in my.
There is a switch you can mute your.
It's off. The ringer is off.
See how quickly we blame Peter Gross for that?
I don't understand.
Sorry, Peter. We love you, Peter.
That was Mike Eppel, everybody. Not that anyone heard that except me, but I'm like, where is that music coming from?
I mean, it wasn't anything from Scarface.
Real quick, so you talked about the old tech that. Say hello to my little friends. Okay,
cockroaches. Not that was ever on.
You guys mentioned the old tech that used to get 680 on the news, and I will tell you, if you have those old machines and you don't throw those out because you guys are the best. You don't throw out that old tech, the old electronics. You recycle them properly by going to recyclemyelectronics.ca and finding out a depot near you where you can safely.
I have a lot of
off.
electronics to recycle.
Recyclemyelectronics.ca, but I've been telling you for many months now.
I have old laptops that weigh a ton, and I'm going, what should I do with this?
Well, you don't put in the garbage.
No,
those
I know
chemicals
that.
end up in the landfill.
I know that,
Eppel.
but I also, what do they do with the? And I don't want to get off topic. What do they do with the hard drive?
Wipe that maybe, and then bring it over to.
Wait, how do I do that?
Is there anything incriminating on that hard drive, Eppel, that you want to tell us about?
No,
a lot of tractor pictures.
That is true. Probably so. I do have an affinity to farm equipment.
So let's
sounds
fast
weird.
forward.
That just sounds wrong.
Your tractor. I don't know if Recycle My Electronics takes your tractors or whatever, but okay.
Better not.
August 10th, 2008. Scott Metcalfe, do you remember that day?
I do.
What happened that day?
Thousands of people had to be evacuated from their homes because of explosions and fires at the Sunrise Propane Facility in Downsview. This is about Richard Southern, and we'll get to that. So it's about 3 o'clock in the morning. Richard Southern and Judy Friedman were the co-anchors Sunday morning, and there were a flood of calls from people asking about the explosions and fires.
Sure.
So at that moment, Richard made a terrific decision, really creative. He decided that he would go to the scene and leave Judy as the solo anchor, which is unusual. Usually you need the two people to run the thing. And he was one of the first reporters to get there to see the destruction.
It's Sunday, August 10th. Good morning. I'm Judy Friedman. 12 degrees and partly cloudy in downtown Toronto, and here's what's making news this hour. And we have breaking news from Downsview area where dozens of powerful explosions early this morning has led to the evacuation of a number of people in the Keele and Wilson area. 680's Richard Southern is live at the scene and joins us now with the latest. Richard, exactly what is going on?
Well, hey there, Judy. I just arrived on scene here in the Kiel and Wilson area just a moment ago. We have a massive fire here. Officers on the scene are telling me that it is at a propane refinery. Of course, now we're not going to go ahead and say that's an official word because they're just in their cruisers, of course. A huge emergency response here. But again, they are telling me this is a propane refinery, and I have every reason to believe that is the case. The air just thick with the smell of propane here. I am not far from the blaze. I'm looking at the flames billowing up high into the air right now, Judy. Thick black smoke encompassing about 1 or 2 city blocks here. As 680 News has been reporting this morning, this entire area being evacuated by police. They are going door to door here, getting everyone out of their homes and away. Of course, with all the streets closed off, as you heard from Pan, I had to walk my way into the area. As I did so, pretty much every single person outside in front of their house, talking with their neighbors, comparing stories. They all heard a large series of explosions this morning. Those bangs continuing to happen sporadically here, presumably perhaps propane tanks going up. Blaze, as far as I can see from my vantage point, Judy, does not appear to be spreading at this point, but again, a very active blaze. Live on scene here at Kiel and Wilson. Richard Southern, 680 News.
Good job, Richard.
Thank you. I'll never forget that. I mean, the 680 studio at the time is where it is now in the Bloor and Jarvis area, and it was 3 o'clock Sunday morning. We were leading, Judy and I, with "It's going to rain tomorrow." It was a slow news day,
right?
And we we felt the newsroom shake, and we said, "What is this?" And I remember going on the Canada Geological website thinking this was an earthquake, and can I confirm that this was an earthquake?
Right.
And at the same time, we started to receive calls of people reporting a big blaze, and they were calling from the West End. It took a few calls, Mike, before I connected the fact that what they were talking about in the West End was likely what I felt in the East End. And it was at that point I knew we got a big story here at 3 a.m. on a Sunday.
Never proclaim out loud that it's a slow news day.
Yeah, exactly. And it always happens when you're least expecting it in the middle of the night on a weekend.
That's right.
That's incredible. I was thinking of Hank Hill from King of the Hill.
But Mike, can I tell you something?
Hold on. My Hank Hill quote is, he sells propane and propane accessories. Okay, Rich.
The episode when his wife started cooking with charcoal and he couldn't believe it.
I'm a big, that's my second favorite adult cartoon is King of the Hill.
If I may, it speaks to the fact that we are, until this day, live 24/7. There's nobody else doing news on the air overnight anymore.
Let's talk about that, because back in the day when I was a young man, you had Storm and Norman Rumack, and you had these different people that were live overnight on our airwaves. Like, are they live on 1010?
No.
What about Jim Richards? Is he live on 1010? He might be live for a bit.
In the evening.
Not
it's not. Oh, yeah, that's right.
They replay it overnight.
Right.
No, Paul Cook mentioned this yesterday about when he was working overnights, how many other great names in radio news were also working overnights on all of the AM, and he was on FM on CHFI doing overnight news years ago. So, I mean, it's changed dramatically.
Okay, so
in
tonight,
680s.
what is this now? This is Thursday, August 24th. You guys are the first episode I've ever done on an August 24, which I find interesting. There's very few days like that. I mean, Christmas, there's very few days now. You're making history. Richard Southern tweeted that earlier today. So tonight, at let's say 3 a.m. So at 3 a.m, if I go just, play with my, do I have a dial anymore on my radio? I don't know. Let's pretend I do over here. If I start
on your phone streaming,
if I start cruising radio stations, let's start with the AM dial here. Is anyone else in the GTA live at 3 a.m.?
No, I think we can confidently say that's not the case, right?
What I would AM, I don't think there is anybody. Now, what I'd say about FM is CBC would have live newscasts, but I think the other programming around that is recorded.
Coast to coast, maybe.
Yes.
I
was thinking that too.
Open up the West of the Rockies line. That might be about it. But, I always liken the station to the convenience store, the Rabba Foods or whatever, at the end of your block, that's open if you need milk at 3 a.m. on Christmas Day. That's, we're there all the time when you need us, type of thing.
And the immediacy. You went right to the scene. Boom. Done.
Even on TV, you couldn't necessarily make that
that's
happen
right. Television's got a lot more many more moving parts. Radio and in its simplicity of turning on a microphone, go live.
Or a phone. And I just want to point out that there were many people who probably would have called for a reporter to go there. and it would have taken some time to get somebody, out of bed and all the rest of it. It was a great initiative that Richard had just to go, and great by Judy to take on all of the work.
And sometimes circumstance also works in your favor. I remember Leo Walker driving by on the 401 by Pearson International when that Air France jet went off the runway.
Yeah,
she was just happened to be there at the time. Stopped
on the side. Did live, and she was the first person to say, "I see a bus leaving." Up until then, authorities were saying nothing. She said, "I see a bus filled with people leaving the airplane," and that was the first indication that there were survivors. And again, nobody died in that crash. And then she stayed there as long as she could, and then eventually the police said, "You got to go. We're going to arrest you." But she got the main point.
Yeah, and I think go ahead.
The fact that at 3 a.m. that day when the news was breaking, there were two human beings live working. Like there would have been
three because there was somebody on traffic.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so today you guys are basically the last station. You mentioned CBC on the FM dial.
That's pretty cool, don't you think?
That's I know. I always loved what I always loved about radio was that it was live and local, and that's less and less the case today. But that's still the case 24 hours a day on 680.
That's it.
Bless you, boys. As Joe Bowen
there's
would
24
say.
hours out of the day you could listen, Toronto Mike. Just saying.
Richard, I only have 2 ears.
And we've had I just in the business department alone, we've had a number of sort of play-by-play events that's part and parcel to listening to find out what's happening right now. And I can remember, 97, the collapse of Briex, for example. We had camera crews coming into our newsroom to film, in this case me, talking about how the stock was plunging on a moment-by-moment basis.
Right.
Things like that, or the financial collapse of 2007-08. Or
the night of Brexit in the UK.
Brexit?
I was doing business. We tape it at the end of the day. I taped it all. I went home. I was eating dinner. I was watching CNN. Oh, my goodness. They're voting to leave. The financial markets are crashing. I went back to work, and I worked all night long.
How late did we stay up? We stayed up all night the night that Trump got elected.
You and I were up all night the night Trump got elected.
Wow.
Watching the markets plunge. And then they bounce back. It was weird.
But that's the kind of people that work there, Mike, is they care so much that they'll come in at the snap of a finger just to be there when things are breaking. And that's fantastic.
All right. Speaking of breaking news, there was more breaking news on October 22nd, 2014. What happened that day, Mr. Metcalfe?
Yeah, this is another great... Cormac, you didn't go to school with Cormac, right? No, you went to school with Colin DeMello, and who else was there?
Judy Friedman.
At Seneca.
Jackie Crandall.
That's right. Cormac went to Humber. Anyway, so October 22nd, 2014, a gunman opened fire on Parliament Hill. Corporal Nathan Cirillo, on ceremonial sentry duty, was killed at the National War Memorial, a shocking, tragic event. The gunman then managed to get into the center block at Parliament Hill, which was, again, another shocking thing. That's where the House of Commons and the Senate chamber are. So 680 Parliament Hill reporter Cormac McSweeney was in the center block at that moment. He was on the phone with editor Betty Harrison and planning out the day's coverage. So when the shooting started, Cormac stayed on the phone with Betty. And he also had the presence of mind, and this is just amazing. He had a second phone that he used to record interviews. He turned on that phone to record himself running from the gunshots. So he thought it was a shotgun. Somebody had said it was a shotgun. So he says in the clip, it's a shotgun, but it was a rifle. But who knows, in that marble and sandstone, you hear the echoing of guns, you don't know. So here is the full audio of Cormac McSweeney as he was running for cover as the shots were being fired.
I don't know. There's a bunch of gunshots. Where do we go? Where do we go? Where do I go? This way? This way? Okay, thank you. Yeah, are you rolling on me right now? Okay, I'm in a security office right now. Apparently, somebody has walked up to the front steps of Parliament Hill with a single guy came in with a shotgun. Yes, go put me on air right now.
Wow, that's gave me chills right there. Wow.
Yeah. And so Betty Harrison put him on live at that point, and that's when people first heard about what had happened. And it was still happening when he was on the air.
And he won a international award for that,
Yeah,
right?
the RTDNA in the United States gives out the Edward R. Murrow Awards, and they give out regional awards. Peter Gross, who has won, I think, at least 5.
Peter Gross has won 5 Edward R. Murrow Awards.
Writing.
He deserves them.
We would always submit Peter's writing.
Great writer.
Fantastic. So I didn't know it was 5. That's fantastic.
Okay, before we get back to Cormac, there's these Sovereign Awards, right, for coverage of horse racing things. And these are typically going towards large enterprises like Woodbine Entertainment or whatnot. But Peter Gross and his Down the Stretch podcast has been nominated multiple times. Am I right, Peter?
If 2 is multiple.
Multiple, yes. But 2 is multiple.
Yeah. Well, it's fun to brag about it. Yes, Down the Stretch podcast has been nominated 2 years in a row in Outstanding Audio Visual. There are 3 nominations every year. Every year, Woodbine Entertainment gets nominated. They've got millions of dollars of technology and editing and cameras.
They have a team.
Stuff. And Alberta Racing produces great stuff every year. And then the third nominee is always Down the Stretch. And that's out of a pool of 3 submissions.
Wait. Firstly, do you know that for a fact? There's only 3. No, you're making that up. You're such a humble man. Okay, that's to me, that's amazing that you yourself and you are nominated for that Sovereign Award.
The more important question is, Peter, did you have the 8-1 King's Plate winner?
No, but if you listen to the next Down the Stretch podcast, I had a great interview with Mark Cassie in which I chastised him. I interviewed him in Saratoga. And the first thing I said to him in the interview was, could you not have told me about this horse at 8-1?
I had Jim Lawson on CityNews 680, the CEO of Woodbine, and he picked the correct horse.
It baffles me why I would not pick a horse ridden by Patrick Husbands and trained by Mark Cassie.
He always wins.
Cassie and Husbands win an extraordinary percentage, like over half of all the stakes races.
So
even though there's 20 other jockeys and 50 other trainers, it's so. Anyway,
no surprise that you got 5 Edward R. Murrow Awards. I do want to ask: are there any other Edward R. Murrow Award winners in this room besides Peter Gross?
Well, Scott,
go ahead.
I was going to ask, haven't you been honored?
Yeah, but as the news director, I sort of get lumped in with all this stuff. But
you're also a humble man, much like Peter Gross.
What I want to say though is Peter won the regional award. So there's like 12 regions in the United States, and then they have 1 for Canada. I think it's 13 in the States, and we're region 14, Canada, and the rest of the world. So Peter's won in that group 5 times.
Wow.
It's rare to win the international award. That's where they pool all the Americans and all around the world, and then
Cormac
they decide.
Won that one.
Cormac won that one, and that is extremely rare. Yeah. And he got to go to New York and to the ceremony to accept the award.
All right, congratulations to Cormac. That's amazing that he won that award, Cormac McSweeney. Okay, and that's great clip as well. And is there another podcast that aired that clip that I should know about?
Yes. It's City News 680, 30 years in the rearview mirror, and I thank you very much for that.
I actually might send an invoice to Rogers and just see what happens. Will they pay this invoice? Okay.
So not after all the other things we've been talking about today, I don't think.
But speaking of Peter, we have the next clip.
We're always speaking of Peter on Toronto Mic'd.
So, and then Edward R. Murrow Awards, you have the Toronto Mike Hall of Famer, Peter Gross, right?
Wow.
So Peter is like one of the most creative writers I've ever seen. And this probably won one of those 5 awards, this audio that we have. So it was in 2008, Peter would structure his sportscast that included a bunch of Oscar references from the Academy Awards presented the night before. So this is Monday morning. This is Peter Gross at his magical best.
This is a special tribute to the Oscars sportscast.
There will be blood of the Maple Leafs blue variety in Matt Sundin's veins tonight when the Leafs skate with the Senators in Canada. Sundin told Cliff Fletcher, "I'm not there if you're talking trade." Though many American clubs wanted him, the 37-year-old Sundin held fast to his no-trade clause, meaning the U.S. is no country for old men, though the Eastern promises to exclude Toronto from its playoffs. Atonement for the Raptors as they punished the Knicks 115-92. They did it with a rat-tat-tat of threes and a rat-tat-tat of twoies. 25 points for Andrea Bargnani. Now the Raptors are gone, baby gone, to run with the Pacers tonight in Indy. Teemu Selanne was the right man for the Ducks last night. 3 goals and 2 assists as Anaheim pushed over Chicago 6-3. Jano, that makes Selanne the 25th all-time scorer with 546 goals. Calgary skated into the Wild 2-1. Manitoba's Jennifer Jones yelling, "Page playoff is great," was not intimidated by Alberta's Shannon Kleibrink. Jones got away from her to capture the Scotties Tournament of Hearts with a 6-4 victory in the championship game. Tiger Woods, wearing his traditional red jersey, La Vie en Rose, won the match play championship, flattening Stewart Cink 8-7. When it comes to golf, to coin a phrase, Woods is the American gangster. It's win or nothing. Apparently, Woods was born with that ultimatum. Well, that's my cue. All scores and statistics in this sportscast were tabulated by Price Waterhouse. No writers were injured in the making of this broadcast. Sports at 15 and 45 past every hour, or anytime at 680news.com.
And it's also the audio that you mixed in there. That is also one of your major talents.
Thank you.
Thank you. Your editing.
I love doing that. Yeah. And anything to deviate from the typical reading of scores.
Well, you've already told us you don't really care for sports, do you? I feel like it's like hallelujah. You don't care for
put up
sports.
With the sleeping and kept them. That's just
I do if I've got a bet on the game.
but see, those are the
look. That's fine.
You guys were ahead of the sports betting game.
You were ahead of the market talking about live betting. Like
absolutely,
all the celebrities are talking about it now.
You think there'd be a position?
You would
think parlay that into something, Peter.
Who has an expertise in odds and point spreads,
and you can bet within the game. Yes, you can.
Now, earlier in this program, we dropped the name Mark Daly, the voice, and I just want to take this opportunity to play a little bit of him.
The following program contains adult themes, nudity, and coarse language. Viewer and parental discretion is advised.
Any excuse, right, Eppel? If I can play that clip, I'm gonna play.
Well, the other thing too is the change in the branding for 680, and Mark is a great lead into that. So it was 680 News for many years, and then it became City News 680 because they had thought for many years about combining the two newsrooms and calling it City News 680, and there was that was uncomfortable because 680 News was so iconic,
right?
But when they made the change of production and they hear the introduction for the newscast, it's City News 680 everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the blending, and I hear Mark Daly's voice as part of that. So to me, as I said in the podcast, City News 680, 30 years in the rearview mirror, I said that it goes back to Shakespeare. A rose by any other name would smell as sweet. So a news station is just as useful as it was. And I say to the people who work there that the brand is you and you are the brand. It's what you do day after day after day after day that matters. And so City News 680 will become the brand, and that's fine. And the people there are still doing a great job.
Now, Scott, on that note, so you happily retired, right? I've had you on this program to talk about retiring, but you seem very involved. Is it just you came back for this special project to?
Well, what happened was you were the catalyst.
Whoa, slow down! Yeah. Now I'm interested.
You were the catalyst. So what happened was we did the session on the fan.
Yep.
And as I was walking back to my car after we chatted, I thought, well, there's got to be something for 680. Like it's next year is 30 years. So what do we do? Like we can come on Toronto Mike and that's great. And it's a wonderful way to pay tribute to the station. I said, but the station should do something. So I wrote up an outline of 6 shows, 5-year chunks in each show. And I sent it to Amber and I said, here, you guys should do this. And then she got back to me later in the year, like, I don't know, maybe in April, I think, and said, we think it's a great idea. We want you to do it.
There's no one better for that job.
Like, never recommend an idea.
No, like seriously, like
so I took it on with you. It was a labor of love.
Yeah, and it is so well produced. It is so well produced.
Well, Scott Metcalfe, I mean, It's a second appearance, but I already know from these episodes, these are the most produced episodes of Toronto Mike because Scott sends me notes and these are clips, and I'm like, okay, I know exactly what I'm doing here. So, Scott, you did a great job on this episode. What's the name of that other podcast?
City News 680, 30 years in the rearview mirror. But we really wanted to do that. Everybody wanted to do that.
Yeah.
As a tribute to the station. And also, I hope it's used for journalism students, that teachers use it to have the kids listen to as a lesson in great radio.
Mm-hmm. So in the Rogers family, we just talked about how all sports 1430/590 had a 30-year anniversary, and now 680, which is now City News 680, has a 30-year anniversary. I've been having chats with FOTM Brad Fay, and Brad Fay has been having chats with FOTM Jamie Campbell. And Brad and Jamie are very psyched to come over and talk about Sportsnet, which is hitting 25 years. So no shortage of milestone anniversaries in the Rogers Communications office.
Exactly. That'd be a great show.
Well, they're both gung-ho. We're just waiting for permission from their overlords.
But I mean, Scott lived and breathed 680 News. This guy was there late at night. He was there on the weekends. I mean,
he had no life.
No, I mean, when you're live 24/7, as we talked about, you need someone in charge who, I guess, is watching and listening 24/7, and that was you, Scott.
So here's how I want to close things. You guys have been incredible, and I've thoroughly enjoyed this, but I want to go around the horn here, and starting with you, Richard, and then we'll end with Mike here. And I just want to know, what is your personal favorite memory of your time serving? A couple of you are still there. You're still active, but what is your favorite memory of your time at 680? Let's start with you, Richard Southern. That's how you say your last name, right?
Really appreciate you having me back on. You can just don't call me late for dinner, Toronto Mike.
Well, you're getting the Palma Pasta already, Richard.
Love it. It's been a privilege, to be a part of so many big events, covering provincial politics. And so a lot of that comes to mind, covering the election last year, which we won a group RTNDA award for. But, I remember...
Wait, I hate to interrupt, but what is an RTND? Because it's been dropped a few times, but what is that award? We now know what the Edward R. Murrow Awards are, but what are the RTND?
There are two organizations, one in Canada, one in the United States, the Radio, Television, Digital News Association in both countries. So you have it in the States, they give out the Edward R. Murrow Awards. Okay. In Canada, it's mostly just the RTDNA Awards, although there is a Dick Smythe Award for sound, and they do give names to some of them as well.
Okay, so how many say those letters again?
RTDNA. DNA.
It's in your DNA. So how many RTDNA awards have been won by the four of you in this room?
I was just part of the overall news coverage, which it's a big team at the station, so very honored to be part of that.
Okay.
But a quick memory, I was covering the G20 when it was in Toronto, which, as you may remember, shut down the city. Scott sent all the reporters and myself to Army training. We had a gas mask on.
Wow.
And I remember they kettled everyone very controversially. It's on Spadina. And I stood there in the pouring rain all afternoon and evening, going live on 680 every half an hour. And I was completely drenched when I got back to the station. And standing there was Scott Metcalfe with a fresh T-shirt and a towel for me. And I always remember that. Great to work with. And, working with Mike and Peter, taught me so much. So it's been a great ride. And I appreciate you having us on to talk about it.
Well, Richard, any excuse to get you back on Toronto Mike. You know that. You need your lasagna, buddy. So thank you for being here.
I don't need the lasagna, but thank you, Mike.
I do have a little note just because we're live at live.torontomike.com, and Moose Grumpy will be at TMLX 13 on September 7th from 6 to 9 p.m. with Eppel, Southern, and I. I didn't catch whether Metcalfe would be there. Are you going to make it there? He's very...
sure. If Eppel's there, I'm there.
All right. Look at this. And Peter Gross has to be there. Otherwise, I'm going to delete down the stretch the podcast. Okay. So Moose Grumpy just wants Scott to know that she's going to be suggesting to her future journalism student, her son, who we called on this show, I called him Welcome Matt, but Moose Grumpy's calling him Doormat. I don't think Doormat's as nice as Welcome Matt. But Matt is going to be a journalism student, and she's going to have him listen to, say the name one more time of that podcast.
City News 680, 30 years in the rear view mirror.
Reminds me of a Pearl Jam song, Rear View Mirror. Okay, so Moose Grumpy, thank you for the note. Now we go to Scott Metcalfe. Scott Metcalfe, final thoughts. What's your favorite memory of your time at 680? 80.
I don't have a specific memory. It's just the people I've worked with. And what I'll say about that is I love helping young people get started. And that was one of the great things. Richard as an intern, Cormac was an intern. It was just wonderful to work with them and see them advance. So you can tell Moose Grumpy, and you have my cell phone number. You can pass it on to her son, and I'm happy to talk with him.
Amazing.
About
Moose,
because I love that. I think it's, and we need that. We really need that in this, because it's a tough business. But it's such a necessary business. I mean, look at the great work that has been done, not just by 680 News, but all news businesses and the stories that they ferret out. It's
so
necessary.
Scott, I'm with you 100%. So necessary, so important to a vibrant democracy like we have here in Canada. But I feel undervalued in this country. I see merging of newsrooms. There seems to be fewer bodies on the ground. It just seems like it's underappreciated.
I don't disagree with you there. I think also, though, that people are very creative. And I think there will be people who will find ways to get the news out. And it's easier now. You don't need big towers to send out.
No, we're broadcasting right now.
That's it. So I think
in my basement,
there will be ingenious people who will figure out and find a way to get enough revenue to keep that going, I hope.
Right.
So I'm optimistic about the future. The only other thing I'd say about 680 News was what the people do in there is astounding. Like Mike Eppel and Richard Southern are astounding. They will do an entire business cast and have nothing written down. Nothing written down. They're just looking at screens and numbers and scrolling through, and something might pop up in that moment where they say, oh, look at this. This stock has done this. It is amazing to watch these people work. And it's the same for the people in the control room. And I remember when I first got there, and I was so lucky that John Hinnon hired me as the news director. I almost blew that, and that's part of the podcast, the story in there.
Right.
But I remember coming in and thinking, you know, what I had been doing was 5-minute newscasts at top and bottom of the hour. And that's kind of like the Beatles doing I Want to Hold Your Hand. What 680 News was doing was Sgt. Pepper's. You know, there were tons of people, tapes playing backwards, stuff happening. And I just remember looking at it and going, how do they do this? This is like, I can't even understand how all of this gets done. And so that to me was just I was so fortunate to work with those people and learn how the system worked, and full credit to them.
Breaking news. I feel like I'm 680 right now. Breaking news. Moose Grumpy is in tears. This is her speaking here. She says that is so amazing, Scott. She goes, she's honestly in tears with your graciousness. So expect a call from Welcome Matt at some point soon.
He can text me. You can give him my cell phone number. He can text me and we'll set up a time to talk.
Amazing. So Moose, bring that to Matt and break this news to him at dinner tonight. Peter Gross, you were the second voice ever heard on 680 News on that day in 1993. Second voice after Dick frickin' Smythe. I can't believe that you and I can't believe we even know each other. Peter Gross.
You're so blessed, aren't you?
Are you kidding me? And I love it when you visit because I don't have to warn you about hitting your head on the ceiling. Like, it's such a relief that it's not even a concern. I love it. I love it. What's your favorite memory of 680? And how many push-ups can you do?
I do 100 every morning.
Wow.
Okay. I'm juggling 3 here. Going to the 1997 World Cup in France was an amazing experience, but I'm not going to talk about that.
Did you go to the game?
No. I had no pass. I reported from the field outside the stadium.
You're living the life, man.
Secondly, Mike referred to this. The time I accidentally channeled Al Pacino from Scarface swearing off the top of a sportscast was one of the greatest moments.
Can you recreate it? What did you say?
It wasn't what you said.
You played a clip with swears in it.
Yeah. Can I? Well, I'm going to say
this is not Rogers. This is not 680.
It was during the hockey lockout in whatever year, and
94 maybe. I'm trying to remember.
Okay, it might have been 94. And over and over and over, they kept saying, "Peter, do a story on the lockout. Do a story on the lockout." And I'd run out of ideas and things to say. And what I wanted to do was I wanted to get a clip of Al Pacino going, "I'm the bad guy." guy. Okay, for Gary Bettman. Okay, I was going to
say goodnight to the bad guy.
Say goodnight. Look at me. I'm the bad guy. When he's in the restaurant with his wife and he's ripped out of his mind. And so it's 10 after 5, and I'm trying to find that clip on YouTube. Okay, and I'm unaware that I've got the switch on that when I turn on my mic will put the sound from the movie on air. Yeah. So and I was going to refer to Gary Bettman. I was going to make a reference to Gary Bettman, then cut in, look at me, I'm the bad guy.
Right.
And so then the anchor in the morning, and it wasn't Paul Cook, it was the kids overnight, says, and now sports, here's Peter Gross. And at that precise moment, the clip from the movie was Al Pacino going, "You're all fucking assholes," and that's what went on.
Richard, if I may look at you, I would listen nonstop with that kind of activity.
And the anchor's just, "We'll be back in a moment."
Not our finest hour.
Yeah,
that's an amazing story. Does anyone complain did anyone complain to the CRTC?
Well, people phoned and people thought it was me. People thought that I was having some screaming, yelling argument in the newsroom. And I remember John Hinnon called me in. And John was like, in a moment of crisis was always like the calmest guy in the world. And he says, well, what happened? And I said, well, I was looking for this clip, didn't realize that. And he said, okay, that's fine. However.
By the way, John, anybody have any chats with John lately? Like, how's John doing?
He's great.
Oh, yeah, you're off mic there. Sorry.
I've had a chats with John. He's doing great. He's got 2 grandkids. Life is good.
Okay, happy to hear that. Happy to hear that.
But I'm going to identify now the greatest moment of my 6-8. And I was there from 2000, 2004, and from 2000...
93. Yeah, you were there in 93.
93 to 2000. Yeah. Okay. 93 to... I'm sorry. 93 to 2000.
We know, because we just played that clip from...
And 2004 to 2000... Whenever they 18
there it goes.
But
2019
I've said this many times. This was the greatest moment, one of the greatest moments of my life. It was 6:00 in the morning, and Kentucky Fried Chicken wanted to promote the fact that they had hot wings. And they brought in a bucket of 100 hot wings, and everybody in the newsroom was like, fried chicken at 6:00 in the morning. So I ate half of them.
I heard this story from Gene Velitis. Told me this story about you and the chicken wings. That is quite something.
That's his favorite story. I love that.
No, to this day, the most wonderful, not the most wonderful morning of my life, but up there, top 10.
And they wonder, why do I love Peter Gross so much? That is incredible. Peter, thanks for being here. You were the surprise guest. Didn't even promote it.
I'm surprised to be here.
And I'm surprised that I was so clear, because I can even see now the side door is ajar, because I envisioned you bursting through like the, like I said, the Kool-Aid guy, the Kool-Aid man. And in Monica was just up there to get the beers. And she's like,
I had no instructions
I need to lock
come
the door.
In the
she said,
door.
Peter just waltzed in. Well, she was on a call for one of the big banks. And it's like, okay. That's funny. I got to go back to the records. Did I say side door? Anyway, thank you for being here, Peter. You're amazing. Everybody should subscribe to Down the Stretch. This is the definitive Ontario horse racing podcast, and Peter is so gifted. We will close here with Bojana's favorite broadcaster. I say shout out to Bojana. Mr. Mike Eppel, my biggest fan. What an honor it is to be Mike Eppel's favorite podcaster. You like my podcast more than this 30th anniversary podcast.
No, it's good too. It's really good.
Okay,
give it a listen.
Hey Ref is on the live stream to say he did listen, Scott. And Hey Ref says, I want to quote him properly. He says the 30-year pod was good. And you put an exclamation mark on the end. So there you go. So you can get that printed up for the blurb or whatever. Okay, Mike Eppel, take us home, brother.
I'm going to be very sentimental, because I have to think back to all the people who I've worked with, who've, for the most part, been pretty darn fantastic. I made great friends at 680.
Like Peter Gross?
Like Peter Gross, one of my best friends. Jeff Verhoeven, who is now there, also one of my best friends. Hopefully he's listening to hear this, because, yay!
We'll make him listen.
Validation. No, look, Scott hired me at The Fan years ago. That was a great opportunity to do all sports at that time. John Hinnon somehow saw something in me to do business. Now, I did have a little background in that coming in, but, that's been my career. It's, when I think about it, everything that's provided, to me and my family. John was also willing to say goodbye when I decided to go try television, and did that for 5 years. And over that course of time, realized that my true love was radio. And because I had had such a good connection with 680, never burned bridges or anything of that nature, came back to 680. Now, leaving, I did meet my wife at CTV, and that's been great. But from a work standpoint, coming back to 680 was always my home. And Scott, you were there at that time at 680. How everything kind of, the confluence of events, so everything kind of came back together. So just worked with some great people, and it's a success. And that in and of itself, I find very fortunate. The fact that 680, CityNews 680, is as successful as it is, because we have seen other stations go by the wayside, or draconian cuts by corporations who maybe don't value the on-air content as much, and they look more at just the bottom line. And I encourage, going back to what Moose Grumpy was talking about encouraging tomorrow's journalism students. We've heard about, people saying, oh, I don't know if I want to get into journalism because I don't know the future of it. 680, it's going to be there. And the future there is still a future in journalism, and it is still very bright for those willing to be inquisitive and be, wanting to know specifically the latest or whatever is going on CityNews 680.
Mike Eppel, you did that unscripted, and it was incredible. I now have evidence of your creative genius. Wow. Okay, so around the horn, I got to say thank you to Richard Southern.
We've turned Toronto Mike into a 680 fan today. I'm so excited.
I root so hard for 680. You have no idea. I'm
going to text you tomorrow morning to tune in. 5 a.m.
Let me know what time my shout out is. Everybody, we were on Toronto Mike's yesterday. That's when I'm going to be tuning in.
Put your mic flash on to remind you.
There you go.
Thank you, Scott Metcalfe, for the clips and for these gifts. This is incredible. I got some biking stuff, and I've loved this mic flash. I love it so much. Thank you, Scott Metcalfe. Thank you again, Peter Gross, FOTM Hall of Famer. What more can I say? And thank you to future FOTM Hall of Famer, Mike Eppel. Bojana loves you, man.
Thank you.
And that brings us to the end of our 1,312th show. You can follow me on Twitter. I'm at Toronto Mike. All right, one more time around the horn, because I can't even keep track anymore. Richard, how would you like people to follow you on social media?
At Richard City News on Twitter. And if radio isn't your thing, and I don't know why it's not, every day at 6:40 p.m. on City News on the TV. Fun little segment we do where we talk about all sorts of fun stuff.
And Scott, how can people follow you on social media?
On Twitter, it's Metcalfe 680 News.
And Peter, I know you don't check Twitter, but you are Peter the Gross on Twitter. But you don't actually, you don't ever tweet.
I'll give you my grandson's number. He understands all that stuff.
All right. Well, Peter, if you want to get a hold of Peter, just reach out to me. I'm Mike at TorontoMike.com, and I'm on Twitter as at TorontoMike. And here's the Ep-Man. I know this. On Twitter, you can follow Mike Eppel at Ep-Man. Is there another social media
Not
place?
to be confused with Batman.
No, never.
Which is where I stole that from original, or that was the original idea behind
now
it.
I know the rest of the story.
I'm sort of on Instagram, but infrequently.
Thanks for talking media, by the way, Mike. We love that you're the only person that talks media in Toronto, and we appreciate it.
I'm the last person who gives a shit about radio.
You can also catch my smiling face on breakfast television at 6:40 in the morning.
That's how Bojana recognizes you, from breakfast television. Hey, any truth? Can you tell us who's going to be the new co-host of breakfast television?
I am not in a position to. I cannot confirm.
Because there's a rumor it's Meredith Shaw. Can you confirm or deny those rumors?
Anything.
So you know, though.
I didn't say that. I said nothing.
Don't get him in trouble. He's your buddy. Know? Don't get him in trouble.
I can neither confirm nor deny.
He can't announce it till Rogers announces it.
No, it's not my place.
PR would be mad at him. And I've had issues with PR lately, but not Rogers PR. Okay. Great Lakes Brewery. They're at Great Lakes Beer. Palma Pasta's at Palma Pasta. Getting Hip to the Hip is at Getting Hip Pod. You love it. You're going to get some right now. Recycle My Electronics are at EPRA_Canada. And we have Pumpkins After Dark. They're at Pumpkins Dark. And Ridley Funeral Home are at Ridley FH. See you all tomorrow when Jamie Dew and I are going to kick out our favorite covers of the tragically hip songs. Shout out to Jake Gold. See you all Then.
Gives a damn because everything